Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Paige Elizabeth, and today we are finally doing the Wicked King recap. We have a lot to get through, so I'm going to try and get to it quickly, but first, I have to say a major, huge, massive, ginormous thank you to all of the love and support on the first video in this series. Oh my god. It is so much fun to make these videos, but it's a lot of time and effort, and getting to chat with you all in the comments and getting to read your takes on the story made it so much more than worth it. It's an honor to be guiding you through Elfame in this way. And also a huge thank you to all of the artists once again for giving me permission to use their artwork. I'm obsessed. They're incredible and so talented, and all of their information will be down in the description below. If you're at all confused right now, this is the second video in a series of videos recapping the plot of the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. So The Cruel Prince is the first book in the series. Go check that video out. Today we're doing The Wicked King, and next will be The Queen of Nothing. Also, if you haven't read the series yet, I highly recommend it. It's one of my all-time favorites, and if you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about the world of Elfame. Who would have thought? Okay, I don't know what's gotten into me today, but we're in for a ride. Things are looking a little bit differently than last time, so let me reacquaint you with the wall. Once again, the characters are generally in the location on the map where they reside, but things have moved around a little bit. For example, Carden and Jude are now running things over at the castle. The main exception can be seen over here. We have our boys Severin and Lord Royben. They are not really located in this area at all, but they're present in the story, so they stayed in the same place. Also, Heather, Oak, and Vivian are not in Elfame. They're in a different realm, the mortal realm, which we will get into, but they're also involved, and nobody is living at Hollow Hall anymore, so they scooted on in over there for the recap's sake. The rest of these characters over in our new graveyard, they are gone but not forgotten, for better or worse. And that's really all I have to say on that, other than we also have these sword death tokens still, in case anybody else passes away during this story. Then lastly, on this side of the map, we have the addition of a timeline. In The Cruel Prince, we had a puzzle and a mystery at the center of the story, so we could kind of keep up with all of these clues that we got along the way so that the reveal made sense at the end, and we don't have that happening so much in The Wicked King. There are tons of plot twists and reveals that we need to keep track of, but no puzzle. So this time, we're going to be keeping track of things in a timeline so that we know what happened when, and the reveals will make sense and we'll follow along, same as before. And once again, I hope this makes sense and isn't just like an embarrassing exposure of my brain. Last little bit of housekeeping. We have Miss Brainjar. Oh, she's still here. You thought I forgot about her? Never. And if you'll remember, let me bring her a little closer. She's pretty full at this point. I really haven't touched her at all since the last recap. And Jude's got a lot on her mind in The Wicked King as well, so we will be continuing that journey. And I haven't tested it, so her brain might literally overflow. We'll find that out together. A lot happened in The Cruel Prince, and I wanted us to all start off on the same page. So here's a little refresher on what you missed on Glee. Isn't that how that goes? I wasn't a big Gleek. I'm sorry. Our main character, Jude here, found out that her dad, Daddy Maddock, was working with the nasty, cruel Prince Baelkin to basically murder the entire royal family and steal the blood crown to make Baelkin the new High King of Elfame. But Daddy Matic was planning on double-crossing Baelkin to put the crown onto Baby Oak's head instead. So that way, Matic could rule over the kingdom as its regent. And Baby Oak, by the way, is a secret heir that Matic had been hiding away for 7 years-ish. And when Jude realized that her dad's hunger for blood and power would lead to a very dark future for both Elfhame and her family, she decided to work with the loyal Court of Shadows and her arch-nemesis turned reluctant ally, Prince Carden, to come up with their own plot to steal the Blood Crown and also put it on Baby Oak's head, but then to send Oak away to the mortal world so that he could grow up living a safe, carefree life and then come back to Elfhame when he's ready to take the throne. At the last minute, however, we find out that Jude was also playing a little bit of a game because she also double-crosses a cruel prince and puts the crown onto Carden's very own head. But keep in mind, this was not a hasty decision because before the coronation, Jude forced Carden, well, he agreed pretty willingly, to swear his fealty to her for a year and a day using fairy magic. So now he has no choice but to follow every single command that Jude gives him without question. So even though Carden is the new High King of Elfhame, Jude is the one who's really pulling all of the strings here. Yeah. Okay. One last thing before we get into the recap. Thanks to a lot of you for roasting me in the comments. I now know that I mispronounced a good chunk of the words that are in the first book. A couple highlights being our very own main character's last name. I was saying Duert instead of Duerte. And also geese instead of gesh. Just know that I am embarrassed and I now have zero confidence in my pronunciation of like any of the words in this story, but I have listened to the audiobooks now, so hopefully that will help us out. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let's begin. Okay, you know the drill. We're starting off here with a part 1 poem, okay? This is Michael Drayton's Nymphidia. Say to him thus, that I defy his slanders and his infamy, and as a mortal enemy do publicly proclaim him, withal, that if I had mine own, he should not wear the fairy crown, but with a vengeance should come down, nor we a king should name him. This time, we begin the story with a tweenish age Jude, and she is outside practicing sword stances. It's a very beautiful day in fairyland. Golden skies, the smell of pine, they're in a beautiful field. It's absolutely whimsical. And Jude is thinking about something that Matic has told her repeatedly. And I'm warning you now, this prologue is filled with a lot of Matic-isms. So, I'm looking at you, alright? But right now, Jude is thinking about something that Matic has said to her a lot. You must be strong enough to strike and strike and strike again without tiring. The first lesson is to make yourself that strong. It will hurt. Pain makes you strong. Here we go. But this little mantra, I feel, gives a lot of context to Jude's decision-making skills that were displayed in the previous book. I am particularly thinking about her routine of daily self-poisoning, otherwise known by another word that I mispronounced during that recap. But anyway, thank you, Daddy Matic, for the life lesson. Jude then makes a classic sword bro comparison, saying that fighting is like chess, anticipating the move of one's opponent and countering it before one got hit. And although I am judging her a little bit for that, I really shouldn't. You know, I'm a cat lady, Jude's a sword girl. We all have our quirks. We also get a little story from Jude's childhood as she remembers when she was learning how to ride a bike, she ripped off her own training wheels and like wildly chased after Vivi down the street, while TARYN was riding very safely with her training wheels on the sidewalk and being the very good little girl TARYN is. And we're brought right back into this tense dynamic between all three sisters that has apparently always kind of been around. A little bit of nature versus nurture here in this moment. Since this is the prologue of a sequel, we have a few details and moments in here that are mostly just to bring us back into the feeling of the story and remind us of a few things. And so, of course, Matic is haunting Jude's mind because he is the murderer of her parents and also the man that raised her as his daughter, and they have a complicated relationship. But we already know that, you know? We've talked about this. Back to the outdoor training that we have going on with tweenish Jude. TARYN is also there, and she's also practicing. She doesn't love sword fighting as much as Jude does. She doesn't love the violence, but she also loves winning and hates losing. And I would like to once again remind everyone that I love TARYN, and I relate to TARYN, and you can't make me hate her, and we will talk more about it soon. It's okay. It's okay if we disagree. It's okay. I love you. I still love you. But moving on. So, beautiful sunset. The girls are out for a little exercise, and Matic comes over to them and says, "We're gonna spar, okay? You two against me." And I want to tell you right now that this is maybe one of my favorite prologues of all time, because the way in which Holly Black is telling us so much in this prologue and also nothing at all, it's a feat to be admired. Admired? Okay, alright, let's get into it. So Matic, baring his teeth with a smile, tells the girls that power is the ability to get what you want. Power is the ability to be the one making decisions. And how do we get power? We get power by taking it. We all know how dear to Jude's heart power is. Then they play a little sparring game. The two girls have to go stand on a nearby hill and defend it from being taken by Matic. And TARYN doesn't really see the point of the game, so she asks if it's more about strategy or about sparring. And Matic says, "What is sparring but a game of strategy played at speed?" They just keep coming. Then Matic leaves them on the hill to strategize against his attack. Jude and TARYN don't really want to do this. They're two young human girls that want to watch TV and go to the mall, and instead they're standing on a literal hill and defending it against their sort of adoptive father, who isn't human and also lusts for murder. But what are they gonna do? Say no? No! Their plan is to have TARYN hide in a tree and throw rocks at Matic when he comes, and then Jude will stand on the hill and face Matic head on. This doesn't sound like the best plan to me, but hey, I couldn't really come up with anything better, you know? So Matic waits like an uncomfortable amount of time, and then he charges at the hill head on. This grown-ass redcap who's implied to be like hundreds of years old and literally is born to lust for blood is coming straight at Jude, and it literally gives little maybe 14-year-old Jude PTSD flashbacks of when he murdered her parents. So understandably, Jude crumples immediately. She tries, but truly, in what world is little Jude and TARYN throwing pebbles from a tree ever going to win this game against Matic? Like, come on. Matic is literally like, gotcha. And then he drops yet another bar and says, power is much easier to acquire than it is to hold on to. And that's pretty relevant to present day Jude, who just basically indirectly gained power over all of Elfame through her deal with Cardin. But that deal is only gonna last for a year and a day. It's almost like we're touching on one of the major themes in this installment of the Folk of the Air series. What? The prologue ends with TARYN complaining about how unfair the game was, and Jude thinking to herself that everything in Fairy is unfair, and then being pulled into the warm embrace of her father and father killer, and admitting that it was good to be hugged, even by a monster. And with that friendly and not at all ominous reminder of the world that we're about to inhabit, we come back to the present day, to the new High King and the bane of Jude's existence, little mischievous Cardan, sitting on his throne and sporting a villainously scarlet cloak, and, according to Jude, a soft, sullen mouth. Stand up. Stand up, please. Let's all remember here the deal that Jude and Cardan have. The one that lasts for a year and a day, and that gives Jude complete and total control over Cardan by giving him commands. Cardan literally has to do what she tells him to, and yet here she is, staring at his soft, sullen mouth and thinking about how much she hates him, so she can't even see that she is metaphorically laid out in front of him at the moment. Come on! At this point, Jude's deal with Cardan is still hidden from everyone. Even the Court of Shadows doesn't really know the power that she has over him, and it's really strange because people assume that they have some sort of deal now that Jude is in a position of power and put the crown onto Cardan's head. But nobody knows what it was, and everyone is a little weirded out by it because they're supposed to hate each other, right? Currently, Jude is standing behind Cardan and his throne while the people of Elfame dance and drink and ask their king to solve their disputes, which is apparently one of the jobs of the High King of Elfame. We find out that it's been 5 months since Jude orchestrated the coronation of High King Cardan. So what's everyone been up to since then? Let's catch up. Well, Oak is with Vivi and her human girlfriend Heather in the human world, safe and sound. 2 thumbs up. Maddox is currently sulking around the court. He is still the Grand General, so he still has power, technically, but mostly at this moment he is just very bitter about losing to Jude in the first book. And TARYN has been dallying with her beloved fiancé, Foxy Locke, our favorite fairy to hate. Oh, and by the way, their wedding is only 3 weeks away from today, which has left Jude feeling a little bitter and a little scorned. Things are still tense between the twins, and Jude has been up to her usual antics of torturing herself with sleep deprivation, denying herself the opportunity to serve fashion, and also desperately trying to figure out how she is going to maintain control of Cardan after their year and a day deal expires. And Baelkin, Cardan's evil older brother, he's been sent away to live a life sentence in the Tower of Forgetting, which is where fairies get sent to rot. But back to the throne room, where Cardan is looking much more comfortable on his throne than Jude would like. And this is the first time it's mentioned, but something that's heavily emphasized throughout this entire book is the connection between a fairy ruler and their land. It's some sort of literal magical connection between them, but not even Jude understands what it is or how it works. So Cardan looks out at this throne room filled with drunk and dancing fae that are basking in the feeling of having a new young high king, and he turns to Jude and says, "Look at them all, your subjects. A shame, not a one knows who their true ruler is." This elephant in the room that is Jude's secret control over Cardan is hanging over them constantly, and Cardan loves to shove it in Jude's face, especially now that their deal is almost halfway over. And because of his constant reminders and her internal valuation of her own self-worth, Jude's a little on edge at the moment. She spent the entire first book fighting tooth and nail to ensure that she would have power in this kingdom, and now that she does, it's a little uncomfortable. One, because her power is temporary, but also she just doesn't love the feeling of having this kingdom that kind of hates her for her mortality staring at her so openly while she stands on this platform above them, and none of them even really know the power that she has or how she got it. And I just gotta say, baby, What did you think it would be like? Regardless, she still loves having power, so even though she's feeling a little torn right now, it's not, like, enough to make her want to give any of it up. So this little fairy dude that kind of has a bad vibe comes up to the throne. He's doing all the right things, like bowing and showing respect, but there's something off about him, something greedy. He introduces himself as Grimson the Smith, and Grimson here has a little bit of history in Elfame as the one and only who created the blood crown, which is a very special crown, as we know, because it can only be worn by somebody with Greenbrier blood. Hence the plot of, like, the entire first book. Grimson is kind of a legend. He's known for being able to do things like turn metal into living beings or making these 6 swords called Heartseeker and Heartsworn, but he hasn't been around at all in a while because back in the day, he swore his fealty to this dude called the Alder King, who was then exiled, and Grimson went with him. It's a whole thing. And if you're interested in any more information about it, you can actually check out one of Holly Black's other novels, The Darkest Part of the Forest. But we won't be getting into all of that here because that would be a lot to take in. All you need to know is that the king that Grimson used to be sworn to is dead. So now Grimson is a free agent looking for a new contract from the highest bidder, and he has his eyes on Cardan's court. Jude's nefarious senses start tingling, but she can't find any tricks in Grimson's words, and Cardan is just like, hell yeah, dude, come on in. All you have to do is swear an oath to me, and we're good to go. But Grimson says, whoa, hold on now. Instead of swearing an oath to you and binding myself to you with fairy magic, why don't I just prove my loyalty by, like, making a bunch of cool stuff for you? How does that sound? And Cardan says, yeah, absolutely. Why not? You can have the old forge out back. No worries. That does not sound suspicious to me at all. And the whole interaction, quite frankly, makes Jude feel sick. Grimson is stoked, so he heads out and another person comes up to the throne. This time, it's an old hag. She's literally an old hag. Like, I'm not being mean. Like, she's literally an old hag. Her nails, twiggy. Her hair, the color of smoke. Her nose, like a blade. She's a powerful woman, okay? Basically, this hag comes up and tries to use clever wording to trick Cardan into marrying either her or her daughter, but Jude sees through her wordplay and stops it from happening before Cardan gets sucked into any sort of nuptials. And then the thought of marriage sends Jude absolutely reeling into a spiral about, like, how marriage in fairyland works, which is very helpful for us readers. We learn that marriage among fairies is a little bit different than it is for humans. Like, where humans vow to be married until death do us part, fairy vows are a little less eternal, with a few examples such as, until you shall both renounce each other, or unless one strikes the other in anger. Yikes. Or for the duration of a life. But who knows whose life, you know? It's very tricky. Royal marriages are also super uncommon because monarchs rule in fairyland until they either die or abdicate. So if you marry the high king or queen, then you now have that role for, like, forever. Thus, it almost never happens. But it's so interesting that marriage is coming up only 3 weeks away from a fairy wedding. It's almost like fairy weddings are going to be important in this story. So if Cardan had married this random hag or her daughter, that would be 2 people that Jude was fighting to get off of the throne so that she could eventually put it onto her baby brother Oak. And that's the only reason that Jude hates the idea of Cardan being married. The hag stomps away, defeated, and we start to hear a screeching, grating sound.
I hear this agitating, grating voice.
Locke pops his head in to say, ugh, you shouldn't get married. You should just sleep around with everyone and party. Ooh, I'm Locke. Oh, I'm so cool and I'm so fun. Sorry. I'm sorry for the biased recap, but he sucks and is the worst. Anyway, Locke says, wait, I actually brought you a present too. What's the present, you ask? It's me. I'm the gift to you. Foxy Locke, who we know as one of Cardan's childhood BFFs, wants to become the new master of revels, which Jude is pretty sure he just made up right now. And the job description that he offers us is, I'll make sure you're never bored, which is a little bit terrifying coming from Locke. Jude tries to shut the situation down, but Cardan asks, are you commanding me? Which is a weighted question when they're standing right next to Locke. And if she does command Cardan, then that'll give away the power that she has over him. So she's forced to say, me? Command you? Oh my god, never. Of course not. So unfortunately, Cardan turns to Locke and says, yes, babe, you've got the job. Ugh! Through Jude's eyes, we are constantly aware of the tension and pressure that this strange secret power dynamic between Jude and Cardan has caused, and how tricky and technical it is to maintain it, especially after the alliance that they formed before Jude put the crown onto Cardan's head, when they were almost friends. As Cardan and Locke begin to conspire about torture in the form of parties for the people of the High Court, the Bomb, one of Jude's Court of Shadow spies, slips in and hands Jude a letter from the one and only Prince Balekin. Apparently, he's been trying to reach out to his little brother, and he wants to strike some sort of bargain with Cardan, so he keeps sending out these letters, but Jude keeps intercepting them and hiding them from the new High King. So Jude decides to make a personal visit to the Tower of Forgetting and see what Balekin has been up to in his princely prison. Jude makes her way to the Tower of Forgetting on a magical horse, and when she knocks on the door of this infamous prison of Fairy's least wanted, she is brought inside by this big, hairy soldier dude named Volciber, and he's kind of big enough to make Jude feel a little bit nervous, because at one point she would have had the loyalty and protection of soldiers in Elfame because of her father, but that might not really be the case anymore. Volciber has bad vibes, but he takes Jude through the pitch black hallways toward Balekin's cell, and on the walk there, Jude is sensing a whole lot of tension, and she knows that it could kind of be from anything. Like, it could be her status, it could be her mortality, Volciber could be having a bad day. Like, who really knows? But it doesn't feel great, so much so that Jude does end up threatening to murder him with a knife to his chest so that he will light some lamps in the hallways. Good old Jude. They get to Balekin's cell at the end of the hallway, and Jude does not like what she sees, which almost feels a little bit unnecessary to explain, because this is bratty Balekin that we're talking about, and this is the cell of a royal. So he has it all done up with like these lavish rugs and a comfy chair, and he even has like a circlet on, so it still looks like he's a prim little prince, you know? And he's also drinking a nice fancy tea that smells like seaweed. Seaweed, you say? Well, actually, seaweed, I say. Anyway, Jude is not Balekin's favorite person ever, considering the fact that she did steal the blood crown from him and put it onto his little brother's head. So he's a little bit testy. And Jude is like, okay, let's just get to the point here, because I know that you've been sending letters to Cardan asking for a bargain, and I've been stealing them instead. So just tell me what you want. Balekin says, oh, I'm sorry. Who do you think you are? Volciber, remind her. And boom, Jude gets slapped open-handed by this giant troll dude. Ouch. At this point, we know that Jude doesn't mind a little bit of blood. She actually has to, like, tamper down her own bloodlust, because now that she's a court seneschal, she can't just go around murdering anybody she wants to. She's a government official. But she's also not just gonna sit down and take it. So she's like, aw, little baby Balekin is so sad because I stole his little crown and gave it to his brother. Oh my god. What do you want? To which Balekin says, I've heard that for mortals, the feeling of falling in love is very like the feeling of fear. Your heart beats fast, your senses are heightened, you grow lightheaded, maybe even dizzy. Is that right? Yeah, I feel sick. And Jude does too, because she's like, whoa, why are you bringing up love right now? I've never been in love. Like, why are you bringing it up when we're talking about your brother? How is that relevant? I don't understand. But Balekin wanting to stir the pot, and honestly also just being like a little bit dumb, is like, oh yeah, I totally forgot. You can lie. And that must be why Carden and Dane and Maddox have all wanted to use you, especially since fairies aren't physically capable of lying. Dang, if I had seen your ambition, then maybe that crown would be on my head instead. Like, okay, Balekin, shut up. And then on top of that, Balekin says that he will not tell Jude what he's been trying to get out of Carden. Instead, he's going to send his message to Carden another way. Soon. Fed up, Jude makes her way back down the dark hallway when a hand reaches out from another cell and grabs her by the ankle, stopping her in her tracks. It's a woman who says, I knew your mother, knew many of her secrets. And this is our very first timeline moment. This mystery woman will come back to haunt us. The mention of her mother makes Jude feel like she's reflecting on past trauma, which is her worst nightmare, so she just sprints away, literally as fast as she can. And when she gets to the front, panting after running, she remembers herself. And she's like, hey, Volsiber, can you actually meet me outside for a second? Because I have a few notes on some changes that I want done around this place, all right? Meet me out back. They head outside and Jude stabs him in the arm with a little, oopsie, I actually lied. Volsi passes out fast, so she tosses him on the back of her magical horse and heads back to the palace and to her court of shadows. As soon as Jude gets back to the court of shadows and the roach sees that she has a guard tied up on the back of her horse, he's like, what are you doing? Like, you know you're a mortal girl, right? And also the High King of Elfhame's right-hand man? Are you serious? He says, next time take a member of the royal guard. Take one of us. Take a cloud of sprites or a drunken spriggan. Just take someone. It's a little bit ominous. This conversation brings up a point of contention between Jude and the Court of Shadows, because at the end of The Cruel Prince, Jude was lovingly given her spy nickname, the Queen, after crowning High King Carden with the help of the Court of Shadows. So she's proven to them at this point that she can spy and plan and lead, but whether or not she can trust, that's still up in the air. And also the fact that she's so similar to Daddy Maddox in terms of ruthlessness and also like stab first and ask questions later mentality, that's always been on the edge of being a gift or a curse. The truth is that Jude trusts the Court of Shadows with her life. They're some of the only people that she trusts. But she has also been bestowed with the belief that many women are gifted, that if you want it done right, you gotta do it yourself. And she's also a little bit hangry. Side note, the bomb and the ghost are here right now, and we find out that the Court of Shadows has some new spy recruits, which is very exciting. But back to the problem at hand, because Volsiber's waking up, and he's not too thrilled to be tied to a chair. He's like, man, you can't do this to me. Wah, the king's gonna be pissed. And Jude is like, girl, do you think the king knows what I do in my free time? No. And in what world did you think you could hit me and not have to face the consequences? The consequences she speaks of are dying at the hands of the roach, or telling Jude about the bargain that Balekin is trying to make with Carden. Unfortunately, Volsiber doesn't really know anything about that, but he tells them that there's another secret that they might be interested in. Apparently, Queen Orla, Queen of the Undersea, and also mother to Carden's former lover, Princess Nicasia, has been sending some sea folk into Balekin's prison cell in order to leave him little notes and gifts. And she's planning on breaking the treaty between the sea and the land in order to bring Carden down, because she's not very happy about his ascension to the throne. This information surprises Jude because of the love that Carden and Nicasia still have for each other. So you would think that Queen Orla is pleased that their families have this positive connection. And if Queen Orla breaks the treaty between the sea and the land, two unbelievably powerful forces would be at war with each other, which is why the treaty has worked for hundreds of years so far. All of this has Jude's brain gears turning, so she tells Volciber that if he becomes her little spy and keeps an eye on Balkan and his new fishy friends, then she'll do him the favor of getting him a job somewhere other than the Tower of Forgetting, which is like an awful place to work. After Volciber leaves, Jude is pretty clearly stressed out, so the ghost comes over to try and goad her into a sparring session with him by being like, uh-oh, Carden's been practicing his little spy tricks. He's gonna be better than you, which immediately works on Jude, so she's like, let's go, let's spar. And they head out into the woods to exchange some blows. While they fight, Jude thinks about the fact that a few months ago she was basically a high school student, and now she's leading a fey government, and dare I say, she's still more qualified than most of our politicians. Woo! We also get a fresh reminder of Jude's mortality as she spars with this half-fae, half-human boy, and she thinks about the mysterious lady from the tower bringing up her mother. Jude wins the fight, but it doesn't do a lot to de-stress her because the ghost drops a bit of a heavy hitter. He's like, how is little baby Oak tucked away in the human world ever going to grow up to be a good ruler of Elfame if he doesn't know this world? And Jude is like, I didn't really think about it that way. And then she starts to spiral and stress about how eventually she's gonna have to give up this power that she's acquired for herself, and she doesn't really want to. She likes having this power. And on that cheery note, she heads back to the palace and her rooms where a mirror image of herself is waiting outside of her door. Our beloved TARYN, who we all love and adore. Jude is shocked to see TARYN outside of her door because they haven't talked in 5 months, not since Jude put the crown onto Carden's head. And so she's not really sure what to expect. And as readers in this moment, it kind of feels like you need to tense up for a fight. Like, things could get ugly here. But don't worry, because TARYN pretty much immediately says, please come to my wedding with Locke, Jude, please, you're my sister and you have to be there. And you also have to be there because Vivi, Oak, and Heather are coming to the wedding. Uh-oh, Jude files that away for later because Oak, in the fairy world, now that he's a known heir to the Greenbrier throne, that can be dangerous. So Jude says, fine, I love you and I miss you too. I guess I'll come to your wedding. But TARYN's not done on her little mission to kind of pull Jude back into the person that she used to be. She gives Jude some stuffed animals from the mortal world, from before they ever came to Elfame, and says, please, please, come home. TARYN's like, you're the favorite anyway. It'll be fine. And then Jude points out that it's a little impossible for her to be the favorite, considering she stole the blood crown out of her father's clawed fingertips. But TARYN's like, don't think about that. It's fine. But also, speaking of that, I thought you hated Carden. What the heck? Why did you put the crown on his head? And Jude is like, I do. Duh. I totally hate him. And then silently has a panic attack about her conflicting feelings for the new High King. So she decides to tell TARYN what she tells everybody. She made a deal with Prince Carden where he gets to be king and she gets a position of power and Oak gets to be hidden away in the mortal world for the time being. Would Jude love to shove it in her sister's face that she's actually the one running the kingdom while the crown on Carden's head is mostly just there for show? Yeah, she would, but she can't. TARYN then surprises Jude and says, by the looks of your disgusting room and your lack of hot clothes while in a position of power, you could use a little help, okay? Let me take care of all of the things that you don't want to be bothered with while you run the kingdom, okay? Just don't leave me behind in this new life that you've built for yourself. Then Jude surprises them both by saying, yeah, okay, sure, why not? What could go wrong? So TARYN leaves, and notably, neither sister has apologized to each other for anything. And what does Jude do with the stuffed animals that TARYN brought her from home? She throws them into her fireplace. She needs therapy so badly. Like, more than I do, and that's truly saying something. Then Jude takes her nightly poisons and thinks about Balkan's take on humans falling in love, and then passes out on the floor I might add. The ghost wakes her up because King Carden is throwing a tantrum, which is not that unusual for him, so they head over to Carden's apartments and they find chaos. There's broken furniture, ripped paintings, there's even a fire in the corner of the room, and Carden is laying half undressed amidst the destruction, while on the couch in the corner of the room is lovely little Locke and two fairies that we don't know, all of which were clearly here to have a little bit of bedroom fun with the king. Jude clears the room and then says, "What the hell is going on here?" while actively trying to avoid looking at a half-naked Carden sprawled out on a couch. He stands up and takes Jude into his bedroom where he shows her two crossbow bolts sticking out of his bed frame. Someone has tried to kill the king. While Carden was enjoying a little private time with his special guest, two crossbow bolts were fired from a secret passageway. One managed to graze Carden, and the other went into his special guest's foot. Jude is obviously not happy that this has happened, but she doesn't understand why Carden didn't go to get the royal guards waiting outside of his room when it happened so that they could chase down the culprit. Carden reminds her that that would mean the royal guards would be running around in the Court of Shadows' secret tunnels, so he was watching out for the spies. He's very good at playing dumb, our little Carden. Jude finds the hidden passage behind a wardrobe and follows it to the end, which is not very far. It's just a straight pathway and it leads to one room. And inside of the passageway, she finds the crossbow that was used to fire at Carden. And when she pushes open the only door at the end of the passage, she finds herself in High King Eldred's old chambers. They're massive and almost intertwined with the nature that surrounds the palace, with tree roots snaking through the ceilings and walls. And sitting on High King Eldred's old bed is the assassin. When Jude sees who it is, she says, You shot Carden?" Put your guesses in now, people. Get him down, get him down. Are you ready? It's Nicasia, the princess of the undersea and Carden's ex. Yup, and she's sitting in his bed crying and saying, please don't tell Carden I did this, and please don't kill me. It turns out that Nicasia went to pay Carden a special visit, and when she showed up and he was already in bed with another girl, she was so furious that she pulled a crossbow off the wall and tried to shoot the person he was with. Walking through the play-by-play forces Jude to let it sink in that Carden was actually almost killed, and she's a little bit shaken up by it. She's like, Nicasia, you know this is treason, right? Like, if you're not executed, then you'll be locked away in the Tower of Forgetting like Prince Balkan. And Nicasia's like, I'm literally the princess of the sea. I don't have to follow the laws of the land. What are you talking about? And Jude has a little bit of insight here after getting the info from Volsibur that Queen Orla has been in cahoots with Prince Balkan. So Jude says, I know, by the way, that your mom is planning on breaking the treaty between the sea and the land with some sort of loophole. And Nicasia says, how did you know that? And Jude gets to be a sneaky little sleuth and say, I didn't, but I do now. But then she says, hey, don't worry, I won't tell Carden that you almost murdered him if you tell me about your mom's evil little plan. And Nicasia says, deal. Easy deal. So, Orla's plan is to take advantage of Carden's doormat-like tendencies and force him to renegotiate the treaty so that it's more in favor of the sea. If he refuses, her plan is just to sink all of Elfame beneath the waves and call it a day. Jude is like, girl, you know that it's going to be kind of hard to hook up with Carden if your mom drowns him, right? And she's like, oh, no, I'm not worried about that because we're going to get married. That's part of mommy's plan too. And Jude says, Nicasia, you just shot him. But Nicasia doesn't care. She's a fairy, and her mom, the Queen of the Undersea, is planning on marrying her to the High King of Elfame. In her mind, she's got nothing to worry about. Jude also asks what her mom is planning on doing with Big Brother Balkan over here, but she says basically nothing. Like, Balkan is just the backup plan in case Carden refuses the terms to a new treaty. And then Nicasia decides she's done talking, okay? Jude tries to push her, tries to threaten to tell Carden what she's done, but she says, go ahead and tell them if you want, but you should know this. Someone you trust has already betrayed you. That does not sit well with Jude, and this is also another timeline moment. Hold please. Who is it? Who's betrayed her? We don't know yet. Jude goes back through the passageway to Carden's room, and she's like, all right, come on, you can't stay here. So she shepherds him over to her room. He's also drunk. I forget if I mentioned that, but he's very drunk right now, very worked up. So Jude tucks him in to her bed, and he's like, ew, why is your room so disgusting? And she's like, oh my god, the High King is in my bed right now. Carden is literally in my bed right now. This is so wrong. Carden tells Jude that for a second he thought she was the one shooting the crossbow bolts at him, but he knew it couldn't be her because she wouldn't have missed. He's truly just stroking her ego at this point, and then he makes it even worse by saying, kiss me again. Kiss me until I am sick of it. Oh my god, he is literally still thinking about the time they kissed in the first book when he was tied to a chair. And you know what? She's thinking about it too. And then little baby Carden drifts off to sleep after absolutely destroying Jude's world. And we're just getting started! Let's go! Jude spends the rest of the morning sitting menacingly in the corner of her room, staring at Carden while he sleeps in her bed, and thinking about a day at the beginning of their deal and the beginning of Carden's rule as High King. The two of them were walking through the palace gardens together, and Jude was basically giving him the Miranda rights of manipulation to make sure that he could never hurt her or ignore the power that she has over him because she can command him to do anything. Some stipulations of note include, you're never to deny me an audience or give me an order to keep me from your side. Okay, also, every time Jude gives Carden a command, all I can hear is like the Reverend Mother voice from Dune. You're never to deny me. I won't do it again, but just know it's what I'm thinking about. Okay. Nor may you raise a hand against me yourself. And a personal favorite of mine, each evening you will meet me in your rooms before dinner and we will discuss policy. I love a workplace romance, okay? Throughout her little speech to him, Carden's vibe is very nonchalant. Like, I don't even know why you're doing this right now. Obviously, I'll do whatever you tell me to, but that's not so obvious to Jude. This is stressful for her. The weight of this deal that they have with an hourglass that cannot be stopped hangs over every interaction that they have. And even though Jude is technically the one with power, all of the sudden it's Carden who seems so steady and sure, while the ground has started slipping out from under Jude's feet. And to top it all off, the memory ends with Carden confessing to Jude that he kind of likes being king. He didn't want it, but now that he has it, it's kind of fun. And that's a bit of a nightmare for Jude, who wants him to stay in power for a while, but only until she's ready to put the crown onto Oak's head. Back to the present, later that afternoon, the Roach returns and he and Jude figure out why there was that secret passageway between High King Eldred's old rooms and the rooms that Carden is using now, and it turns out that those rooms used to be used to hide away the High King's secret lovers, and the Roach makes a little remark about how interesting it is that Carden is using the secret lover rooms at the moment, considering his life predicament. AKA, he's obsessed with Jude and attached to her not so much by choice, while she rules over the kingdom. He also tells Jude that the Living Council has called her in for a meeting. Let's talk Living Council. It's basically the same as any royal council you could imagine, but with a bit of a fairy twist. So it's a group of powerful individuals chosen by High King Eldred to help out with day-to-day decisions. And this Living Council includes Fala, the Grand Fool, Mikkel, the Unseelie Minister, Nihar, the Seelie Minister, and Randolin, the Minister of Keys, and also Daddy Maddock, the Grand General. I would say these are not Jude's favorite people, and they're also not the biggest fans of Jude either. They don't love how Carden got the crown to the kingdom, and they also don't love that Jude comes to all of the Living Council meetings instead of Carden because he refuses to go. And Jude doesn't like that they have any semblance of power at all because she knows that even small day-to-day decisions can add up quickly. And her dad is on the council, which is kind of awkward after she whipped his ass at their last rendezvous, so it's not the best workplace situation. In today's meeting, the first topic on the agenda is Cardan's attempted assassination. Jude knows that it was Princess Nicasia, but to everyone else, the rumor going around is not that Cardan was almost assassinated, it's that he almost assassinated the girl that he was in bed with, which just goes to show how Cardan is perceived by the general court. Yikes. This line of questioning, of course, was led by Randallin, the Minister of Keys. He is a particular thorn in Jude's little behind, and that's because Randallin is like that old white dude that thinks the world would be better if he was in charge of everyone and their bodies. You know what I mean? He's kind of the worst, and I would like to apologize to Post Malone because he was the only white dude on J-Lo's council. I love you, Posty, and I'm sorry. Randallin tries to take this rumor a step further by saying, you know, part of the rumor is that Cardan tried to kill this girl because she's pregnant. Okay, so maybe Cardan should start coming to these meetings instead of you so that I can tell him what to do, okay? But then Baffin, the royal astrologer, steps in to be oh so helpful, and he adds, the High King is tied to the land and to his subjects. A king is a living symbol, a beating heart, a star upon which Elfame's future is written. Surely you have noticed that since his reign began, the isles are different. Storms come in faster. Colors are a bit more vivid. Smells are sharper. When he becomes drunk, his subjects become tipsy without knowing why. When his blood falls, things grow. Yeah, shit's different when Cardan's on the throne. And the only reason I read that entire paragraph to you just now is because it touches on what we talked about a little bit earlier. Now we know a little bit more about that direct connection between a king and their land. It literally impacts the physical earth and his subjects. And this connection will be important. Alright, Baffin also tells us a little fun fact that all of these isles that you can see here on the map were actually physically created by Queen Mab, one of Cardan's ancestors, when she used her connection to the land to pull them from the sea. I love a powerful woman. You know? This moment might seem like nothing more than a little lore drop. Paige, why are you adding it to the timeline? But this is important, and it freaks Jude out because in her mind, Cardan is a temporary king. He's just holding the throne until she can put the crown onto Oak's head when he's ready to rule over Elfame. But if Cardan is fundamentally tied to the land, it might be a little more difficult than she thought to get him off the throne. Like right now, Cardan is king, but he might actually be the High King. Does that make sense? So while Jude is having this little panic attack about her plan for the future of Elfame, Randallin drones on about how Cardan needs to be making more active decisions as the High King, and he starts listing a few of the lower courts that have not yet sworn themselves to him and the crown, and specifically, he mentions the Court of Teeth. The Court of Teeth also has a Grand General, just like Daddy Maddock over here, and their version of Daddy Maddock is a lady named Grimma Mogg. Grimma Mogg recently quit her job as the Grand General of the Court of Teeth, and no one knows why. And that's something that we should keep on our radars, okay? It's not going to be important for a while, but Grimma Mogg matters. Remember the name, Grimma Mogg. The mentioning of one scary lady reminds Jude of another, so she warns the council, guys, we gotta keep an eye out for Queen Orla, alright? She's planning something. And we know, of course, that Jude got this information from Princess Nicasia and also her visit to Baelkin. But no, because this wasn't Randallin's idea and Randallin's information, and it's coming from a little mortal girl who shouldn't know anything, this information doesn't matter. So they just flat out ignore her. And I would like to mention at this point that in the way that The Cruel Prince, the first book of this series, had a main overarching question of who will wear the crown, the overarching question of The Wicked King is, will there be war. The next topic on the agenda is a party, okay? The Hunter's Moon Revel is coming up, and Locke's job now as the master of revels is to plan it. And the council wants it to be big, fun, and entertaining because they want to impress the new blacksmith in town, Mr. Grimson. But they don't know if he likes parties, so they add that question to the to-do list. Does Grimson like to party? Very important stuff here, people, okay? And actually, that's about it. They got through the whole agenda, all in a day's hard work, I guess. The Red Bull's hitting really hard right now. At the end of the meeting, Maddox runs over to Jude, basically to say, hey, have you talked to your sister yet? Don't tell me you're so busy with your new job as the High King Seneschal that you don't have time for your family. And Jude says, you're not my dad.
You're not my dad!
And Maddox says, well, I actually kind of am. And I'm sorry that I underestimated you before, but it won't happen again, child. And also, if you regret your move, make another. There are games yet to play. Ooh! Don't count him out. Don't count Daddy Maddox out. He is still in this game. But now Jude has some very important seneschal duties to attend to. She needs to move Cardan into the High King's royal chambers, and she wants to have them all checked out to make sure no more secret passageways are missed. And once again, she's on edge. After meeting with Nicasia, you can assume that anytime she interacts with anybody, she's like, who betrayed me? Who is it? Who's the one that's betrayed me? Mentally, of course. This is all happening inside of Jude's head. So she and the bomb go through the entire room, turning everything upside down, and the only thing of interest that they find are these magical little crystal globes that hold memories inside of them. And one of the memories is of a toddler-aged Cardan who is running over to this woman looking for her love and attention, and she just shoves him away physically. So he turns around and he finds this other kid climbing a tree. He goes over to the kid, yanks him down onto the ground, and is ready for a fight, fists clenched. When the woman that he was looking for attention from sees what he's done, instead of scolding him, she laughs in delight, and he laughs with her. It's almost like Cardan learned that cruelty got him the love that he couldn't get otherwise. We also get a little bit of tea from the bomb, who apparently has a crush on the roach. Okay, so Jude only knows about the bomb and the roach from the Court of Shadows, but the bomb tells her about her time with the roach before the Court of Shadows even existed, when they would run around and live life on the edge, conning people and living this Bonnie and Clyde lifestyle, until they tried to pull a con on the Court of Teeth. Second time we've heard about them. And the con they were trying to pull ended with both of them being forced into servitude. Until eventually our beloved Prince Dane found them and recruited them for his Court of Shadows along with the ghost. And the rest is history. But ever since they've had steady jobs as spies in the Court of Shadows, the bomb and the roach have not talked about what they went through together, and the bomb has kept her feelings on the DL. Drama! Jude unfortunately doesn't have much advice for her, considering the only guys she's been into are either engaged to her twin sister or her arch nemesis, so she's not really the most helpful person when it comes to romance. Later that night at dinner in the palace, Nicasia, scoots over next to Jude for a little catch-up, a little chat. She basically just wants to be as annoying as possible, and she sees Jude looking wistfully toward the other end of the table. So Nicasia tries to throw the whole Locke, Jude, TARYN weird love triangle back into Jude's face, but she's like, Locke? I literally could not care less about that loser, okay? And Nicasia says, oh my god, don't tell me you're after Cardan now. To which Jude says, what? Why would you even say that? That's so weird of you. Oh my god, that's so random. I don't know what you're talking about. And Nicasia's like, stop. I just want to know how you became Cardan's right hand. It makes no sense. And Jude says, okay, I'll tell you how I did it if you tell me about Carden's mom. Jude's pretty sure that the woman in that crystal orb with little baby Carden is Carden's mother, and it's got her curious. Nicasia says that she wasn't really anyone. Like, she kind of just had Carden and that was it. She wasn't one of the king's favorite consorts or anything like that. So we learn nothing. And yet something at the exact same time. Then, to uphold her end of the deal and explain how she became the new High King Seneschal, she looks Nicasia right in the eyes, okay? And she says, I kissed him on the mouth. And then I threatened to kiss him some more if he didn't do exactly what I wanted. We've all been there, right? We've all been a little jealous. I get it, Jude. It's fine. It's fine. When Jude gets back to her rooms after dinner, she's in for a little surprise because Miss TARYN has taken it upon herself to have all of Jude's things from Maddox brought over to the palace. And I'm talking everything. Jewelry, clothes, trinkets. She brought it all. And now Jude is staring at all of this stuff that she knows is hers, but it feels like it belongs to a different person. What a beautiful way to remind us how far Jude has come since the beginning of this story, when she was just a high school girl who wanted to be a knight. Oh my god. Since Jude agreed earlier to let TARYN basically help her take care of herself, TARYN has also brought along some design sketches for new outfits that Jude can wear around the court. And it becomes clear to Jude very quickly that she's trying to butter her up for something. TARYN's being very doting. You know, the design sketches are sick as hell, but she's also ignoring the fact that Carden's clothes are still on Jude's bed from when he slept there a few nights ago, and that's not something that would usually go ignored. So Jude is like, okay, what's going on here? I know you're up to something, fess up, okay? What do you want? And TARYN says, ugh. Okay, I really want you to stop Locke from becoming the master of revels, all right? He's gonna try and mess with everybody by creating these perfect little situations and devolving them into chaos, and it's gonna be a nightmare. And Jude's like, babe, I know, okay? I don't want this to happen either. But Jude knows that if she goes to Carden and commands him to take the job away from Locke, then he's gonna start to resent her for trying to control the little things when she already controls everything else. She's trying to keep a little bit of a balance in power here. Jude's also surprised to hear this from TARYN, and I think it's really interesting because we don't know a lot about TARYN and Locke's relationship, and TARYN basically says that she loves Locke when he's around, making her feel like she's the main character, but she hates it when he's away, ruining everybody else's lives. So it sounds like a pretty healthy relationship, I would say. Again, Jude knows that she's not going to get anywhere with Carden regarding this issue, so she lies to TARYN and just says, I'll talk to him and I'll see if I can get it worked out. And TARYN, who did in fact notice Carden's clothes lying about, is like, hell yeah, this is totally gonna work. And just despite the TARYN haters a teensy little bit, I still love you, I swear. I will be reading this description of TARYN that we get from Jude's perspective, okay? TARYN doesn't like conflict. Her manner of dealing with all the terror and confusion in our lives has been to become immensely adaptable, like one of those lizards that change color to match their surroundings. She's the person who knows what to wear and how to behave because she studies people carefully and mimics them. I love her. I love her. They're just both control freaks. The two of them, control freaks. And I love them. Speaking of Locke, Jude is pretty stressed about the party that he's planning for the Hunter's Moon revel because the anticipation has everyone in the court all riled up and spreading all of these rumors about how wild Carden is, like with the general mayhem that he used to cause, and also now he's trying to murder potential lovers in his bed, which we know was literally just Nicasia, but they don't know that, you know? So all of this talk has secured his folklore as a wild, ruthless leader, which has just made Jude more aware of the control that's slipping out of her grasp. So she goes to pay Carden a little visit to see if they can renegotiate this year-and-a-day deal. In Carden's room, she kicks out a bunch of quarters, including TARYN, which is interesting. Now she's hanging out with the High King, okay? And when they leave, Jude sits down to basically say like, hey, so what if I got to have complete control over you for like a handful of years instead of just the next 6 months? I think it would be really good for you because I would do all of the hard work. Doesn't that sound like totally perfect and awesome? And Carden basically says, you gotta be kidding me. Okay, either you find a plan where we both get to trust each other and work together, or you can get out of here. To Jude, that is unfathomable, so she accepts defeat for now. And then Carden tries to flirt with her, including a little bit of hand-holding, so she skedaddles out of the room as quickly as she can, which causes her to run into Val Morin. And he is an interesting character because he's kind of like a funhouse mirror version of Jude, because he used to be High King Eldred's seneschal, and now Jude is the new High King seneschal. And also, Val Morin has kind of lost his mind. He offers Jude some advice, but he tells her up front that he knows she's not going to take it, and the advice has to do with juggling. It's how, as you add more and more things while you're juggling, you have to juggle faster and faster so that they don't all come crashing down. He says, my advice is that you learn to juggle better than I did, seneschal. And Jude straight up turns around and walks away. So he is right. She's not going to listen to his advice. And he's even more right than he realizes, because that's not even going in the brain jar. Nope. And then it's party time. Okay. It's the Hunter's Moon Revel. It's officially here, and Jude gets one look at Carden. She sees him sitting on this makeshift throne made of stone. Didn't mean to rhyme. And she's like, oh my god. Wow, he is a king. She goes over to say hi to him, and she realizes that he's stolen one of her rings straight off of her finger. It was when he was doing his little flirtatious hand-holding, and she ran away from him just a little bit earlier, and Jude's not very happy that he did it without her realizing it. Oof! Then he takes her on a little walk just to almost pull her close, but decide against it. He also warns her to get out of this party because Locke has a nasty little plan for the evening. Ugh. And then Jude notices a parallel between this revel and one not too long ago, where Carden ripped off the wings of a moth boy just for his joviality. But now, as Carden walks through the crowd and people reach out for him and flirt with him and try to dance with him, he takes it all with a good-natured laugh. Our little Carden is growing up. And she hates to admit it, but Jude is kind of into it. Okay, now we have a lot happening at once. This is a juicy party. Let's get into it. Nicasia shows up to the party with none other than the blood-crowned blacksmith Grimson, and the vibe between them is weird. Like, it's a little too friendly. But then Grimson gives Carden his very first gift. It's an earring. We also learn that the Court of Shadows is surrounding this party. They are locked and loaded and ready to go in case anything happens. Then Jude runs into the Court of Termites representative, who, if you are an A++ student, you might remember taught a lesson to Jude and Carden when they were still in school. Then she helped Lord Royben help Jude put the crown onto Carden's head. The representative doesn't say much, mostly that Royben is not really into Carden's whole ruthless ruler persona that's spreading around with all these rumors, and also that they haven't forgotten that Jude owes them a favor for getting their help in putting the crown onto Carden's head, and they will be calling on that favor when the time comes. Then just when Jude thinks maybe tonight won't have too much drama, Locke steps up to the plate and says, hey everyone, listen up. It's time to crown the Queen of Mirth. The Queen of Mirth is not just difficult to pronounce, it is also a game that the Fae play, where they steal away a mortal girl and they get her drunk on wine and dancing, only to trick her by making her think that she's being honored with a crown, when in reality the Fae are turning her into a joke and making her look like a fool just for the fun of it. Jude's not too happy about this little game, because if Locke has actually stolen away a mortal girl to torture her like this, Jude will murder him and everyone that he's ever loved. But Locke has put a twist on the game. Instead of choosing a mortal girl that doesn't know she's being humiliated, he has chosen our very own Jude to be the Queen of Mirth. This does not make Jude feel better, okay? But she doesn't know what else to do, so she decides to just go with it and hope that it gives her a little bit of control over the situation. Locke says, hey Carden, what do you think about our queen for the night? And he replies that Jude's beauty is excruciating, alarming, distressing. Then they bring out this nasty dirt dress to throw on top of Jude, and she says, hold on, and then strips down to her underwear. So of course Carden sidles right up to her, only for Jude to say, I hate you, just to him, and he obviously loves it. So she gets in the dress and then gets shoved onto the dance floor, which for a mortal in fairyland can be really dangerous because she can't physically stop dancing unless someone pulls her out of it. So she demands a dance with her king, and Carden swoops in so that they can have a very tense conversation that's really just about how badly they want each other and also can't stand each other. And Jude realizes that this little game tonight maybe wasn't just to humiliate her. Maybe Locke set this whole thing up so that he could also humiliate Carden. His douchebaggery truly has no limits. The dance ends and Jude is like, thank God, I can finally go home. But uh-oh, all of a sudden, a bunch of sea warriors start to rise up from out of the water, and they're not exactly here for the celebration. Jude runs to the nearest guards to tell them that the sea has come for the king, and immediately they go to protect him around that makeshift throne that he has, while all of these sea folk rise up out of the water and approach the revel. They're described as being these like anthropomorphic fish figures that lean more toward the human side in terms of body parts, but more toward the fish side in terms of aesthetic. I personally picture them kind of like the aliens from the first Aliens prequel. But like with gills, a little bit more fish-like. So they make this grand entrance and they tell Carden that they have a message from Queen Orla. And Carden's like, guys, chill out, come on in, party a little, have a drink. But they say, hey, thanks, bro. We actually can't party until we deliver this message, okay? And then one of the Selkies steps forward and she sings a little tune. She says, the sea needs a bridegroom. The land needs a bride. Cleave together lest you face the rising tide. Spurn the sea once, we will have your blood. Spurn the sea twice, we will have your clay. Spurn the sea thrice, your crown will away. Clearly the sea has not been nice so far, but I love them. They bring something to the party that it's truly missing. Up by the throne, Locke is like, was that a marriage proposal? But Carden recognizes it as the threat that it really is. He tells the sea folk that he'll send a response when he has one, and the conversation kind of dies there now that the threat has been delivered. So Carden is like, okay, now dance. I told you to dance. And dance they do. Jude goes to Carden and he tells her to assemble the living council in his room so that they can figure out next steps, and she nods and turns to do exactly that when she realizes that Carden just gave her an order, and without question, she went to follow it. Why does that give me chills? Because I'm sick in the head. But also because we're seeing one of Jude's greatest fears play out in real time. When she came up with the plan to put Carden on the throne while Oak grew up in the human world, it was with the caveat that she would be the one actually ruling the kingdom, and Carden would just be a placeholder. But now, as she loses control because the deal is almost up, she's watching Carden gain control as he grows into himself in a way that she never even wanted to imagine, because it kind of feeds into this nasty little desire she has for him and her own self-hatred. So the fact that she's not only seeing him grow into this role in real time, but that it's also overpowering her own actions, yeah, this is a big moment, and it's going right onto our timeline. Get it? It's a moon. From the Hunter's Moon Revel. Anyway, Jude sends out a message to the Living Council to get them all together, and then she heads to her own rooms to wash off the stink of being the Queen of Mirth when she sees a letter from dear old Daddy Maddock. The letter tells her to go meet with him in his war room before the meeting with the Living Council, and this feels bad to Jude, but she already starts planning. She knows that this is a good opportunity to find out what's going on in Maddox's head, because his worst nightmare would be a wedding between Carden and Nicasia, since that would make it almost impossible to get the throne onto Oak's head, and his dream, as we know, is to get the crown onto a child Oak's head so that he can basically do what Jude is doing now and rule over the kingdom, but in a much more disturbing and traumatizing way because Oak is a literal baby. So she goes to meet him in the war room, and the vibe between them is that Maddox thinks he has realized the full potential of his daughter, that he sees her for who she is and what she is capable of, and so he treats her in a whole bunch of small ways as an equal instead of a child. To Jude, this feels unnerving because he's never treated her this way before, and she has some trust issues when it comes to Daddy Maddox. For good reason. But it's also pretty quickly clear to both us and Jude that Maddox does not actually understand her, and he still sees her as a child playing at war, because even though he lets her sit as his equal, he starts off this conversation by saying, "I thought you might be finally reconsidering some of the choices you made," as if he's still a father scolding a child. The rest of this conversation is this tense investigation of both players trying to figure out their opponent's secrets and strategies. Maddox suggests that Jude betray Carden and rejoin Maddox before any sort of war actually starts to break out, because he is fully convinced that Queen Orla is planning a bloodbath, and that she wants Nicasia to be queen so they can go all throughout Fairyland murdering the lords and rulers of the lower courts until Nicasia and her mother rule them all. Jude can fully believe that Orla would be planning this, but it still seems stupid to join Maddox when he says that he wants to work with her to gain power, but he won't tell her any of the plan or even her part in the plan, and so it seems like he just wants to use her and then keep any power that they gain for himself. So even though he outright threatens her and says that if Jude doesn't join him now, then he'll be forced to go after her with the full force of his ability, Jude is like, I think I'll pass. Thanks, Dad. And then she leaves him with this absolutely scalding speech about how he let her endure torture at the hands of the Fae for her entire life because he wanted to pretend he didn't know what was going on as long as it benefited him. It's awesome. Page 117. I highly recommend it. But now it's time for another council meeting. The council is a bit of a mess because they've never had a meeting with Carden actually present, and also because at the last meeting, Jude told them that Orla was planning something and talking to Baelkin, and they just flat out ignored her. And also, Jude never told Carden about the Orla or Baelkin thing, and he's not super thrilled that the way he finds out about it is at a council meeting like weeks later. They don't really come to any conclusions, but they do note that baby Oak might be in danger when he comes to Elfhame for Locke and TARYN's wedding, because it's likely that the sea only wants there to be 2 Greenbrier heirs alive, one to wear the crown and one to put it on their head, and Carden refuses to have his brother Baelkin murdered because of his virtues. Then Carden cuts off the meeting and says that it's time to talk to Nicasia, so they bring the sea princess in, and Carden is furious. He does not find this threatening proposal from his ex's mom to be very endearing, and after smashing a teacup against a wall and ignoring Nicasia's attempts at looking small and innocent and sweet, she kind of gives up the ruse and steps up to him to say, "We would be legends," before leaving the room with a very dramatic flair. After that little display, Carden kicks everyone out of the room, but demands that Jude stays, and her reaction to getting another order from him is to say, "Give me an order again, and I will show you true shame. Locke's games will be as nothing to what I make you do." And then she stomps out of the room herself and goes to plot and plan in the Court of Shadows. After the council meeting, one of her priorities now will be extra protection for Oak, especially when he comes to Elfhame for the big wedding. And when thinking about protecting Oak from the sea, she starts to think about Baelkin rotting away in the Tower of Forgetting, and that mystery lady who grabbed her ankle and knew her mother. It's called a train of thought people keep up, and this is where Jude really starts to get thinking. She's cooking, as the children say. Ooh, I'm sorry, I know I'm old. Okay, so Jude wants to get false information to this mysterious lady to see if she'll pass it on to Balkan. That way, Jude could give her bigger info drops and try and kind of weed out what the C and Balkan are planning together. This feels like a good plan to Jude, so she goes to the bomb to tell her and to ask if some of the new spy recruits could go get this lady from the Tower of Forgetting. And the bomb says, of course, what does she look like? Tell me about this mysterious lady. And when Jude describes her, the bomb says, wait a second, I know who that is. I don't know her personally, but that's Cardin's mom. And you know what? That makes Jude want her even more. So the next thing we know, the Roach is bringing in Lady Asha, mother of High King Cardin, to Jude's office as the leader of the Court of Shadows. Mothers meeting to maximize their joint slay. They have a little face-off and the games begin. Lady Asha says that if she's going to be spilling any juicy palace secrets, she's going to need freedom from the Tower of Forgetting. And, more importantly, to her, she wants Cardin to never find out that she's free, which speaks volumes about her parenting style. Jude says, I'll consider it after you tell me something that's actually worth that much, and definitely not today. Okay, Jude is deathly curious about what went down at the palace that ended in one of the prince's mothers being locked in the Tower of Forgetting, but she doesn't want to lay all her cards on the table. So instead, she asks about her own mother, Ava. Lady Asha tells her that Ava was given a prophecy when she was still living with Madoc in Fairyland and pregnant with Vivi. She was told that her child was destined to be a greater weapon than Justin could ever forge. Jude asks for clarification here on the her child part of the prophecy, but Lady Asha says that's as specific as the prophecy was. Very interestingly vague. That's all Jude's gonna get out of Lady Asha today, so she says, alright, take a lap around the gardens and then you're headed back to the Tower of Forgetting. If you send us something in the mail with a secret that's juicier than that, we'll consider giving you freedom. And don't worry, because any letter you send out, no matter who it's addressed to, it will end up in my hands. Then Lady Asha is taken away and Jude tells the Roach that during that conversation, she planted some information to Lady Asha to give to Balkan, and she is so sneaky with it that I had no idea what the information was when I first read it. Can you guess what the information is? Sorry, I feel like Dora. We also get a very sweet moment here between the Roach and Jude where he's like, oh my god, you are so ruthless and manipulative. And Jude's like, is that a compliment? And he says, it sure as hell isn't an insult. Ooh, I love the Roach so much. The next thing we know, Jude has a bunch of new badass royal seneschal fits delivered to her thanks to Sister TARYN, who's pulling through in her new role as Jude's PA. These clothes represent a few things for Jude. They show that TARYN does truly know her sister, like that's literally her twin. At the same time, however, she can't help but think about the tension that's still between them because she was humiliated that her twin, her family, saw her be so embarrassed by a boy and also was kind of a part of the embarrassment. So even though they have this good thing going at the moment, as always, still tension. All dressed up in one of her new outfits, Jude heads to yet another council meeting. The living council members are mostly minor characters, although Randallin and Baffin do have a few standout moments, but generally these meetings are kind of what you would expect from a frustrating back and forth between people in a group project that hate each other. So I'm just gonna explain the important parts. The big topic now is TARYN's wedding. Why? Because baby Oak is going to be at TARYN's wedding and they suspect that Orla is out for Oak's blood, and Madoc, as per usual, wants to risk his family for his own success. His bright idea is to use Oak as bait to lure out the sea folk and then attack them when they think they're pulling a fast one on the land. Jude says, boo, maybe we shouldn't risk a child's life so that you can start war even more quickly. But if she's being honest with herself, she's not sure that it's a bad idea. And I never said that Jude is a reasonable person, so... Also of note during this meeting, Baffin says that the stars are communicating that there will be a new monarch soon, which is vague and basically says nothing, but it is still important. And at the end of the meeting, Randolin, the douchey master of keys, kind of corners Jude and says, hey, you do know that you have some power as the High King Seneschal, right? Like, if you hate Maddox so much, replace him. We could have a different war daddy. And Jude is like, I never really thought about that. Then Jude gets 2 letters. One from Vivi saying, hey girl, come pick me and Heather and Oak up for TARYN's wedding tomorrow, please. And a second letter from Carden saying, get your butt to the throne room now. So she goes to the throne room and she finds Carden dealing with a dispute between 2 musicians. Basically, one of them stole an instrument and broke it, and then the other stole one too. And the important part here is that Carden comes to a solution, and Jude is torn between whether it's a genius one or an obnoxious one, which sums up her current feelings for him. When that's all handled, Carden takes Jude into this secret room under the throne where the walls are covered in moss and mushrooms, and it's pretty small. It's clearly meant for intimate gatherings and meetings. And he pulls out a letter that he received from Baelkin that says, if you want to save your neck, pay me a visit and put your seneschal on a leash. And Carden is like, Jude, what have you been up to? You didn't tell me about the letters coming in from Baelkin, or about him meeting with Orla, or about Nikasia's plans for me. What's going on? And Jude is like, yeah, those are all of the things that I have been hiding from you, definitely. But this is a good thing. Lady Asha told Baelkin that Jude was the one getting all of his messages, which is exactly what Jude wanted. So now she knows that she can give information to Lady Asha and it will get passed along. She tells Carden that he should have Baelkin brought into court in chains so they can see if they can get anything out of him while he begs for his freedom. Jude also suggests that Carden goes to Nikasia to ask her for more information because she's definitely holding out on them. And he's like, how do I get info from Nikasia? And Jude says, you know, use your wiles. Seduce her, you buffoon. To which he replies, are you seriously asking me to seduce my ex-girlfriend for information on her mom right now? And Jude's like, yeah, so what? And of course, Carden does the most unbearable thing, which is to step forward and say, okay, how should I seduce her? Like this? And to put it simply, the line works and they get it on. They don't actually sleep with each other, but it's a huge moment for Jude because she's never really done anything other than kissing, so she's kind of nervous, but don't worry, she has a wonderful time, and at the end of it all, she has a revelation. She thinks to herself, the single last thing in my head, that I like him better than I've ever liked anyone, and that of all the things he's ever done to me, making me like him so much is by far the worst. A round of applause! This emotional revelation sends Jude into a, you guessed it, absolute spiral. And what do we control freaks do when we feel like we're losing control? We dive into something that we can control. So Jude makes a little visit to Foxy Locke's house, and she waits for him very patiently by the door so that when he gets there, she can shove a knife to his throat. The goal here is to threaten Locke before his wedding with TARYN, but we're in for a bit of a surprise here because Locke doesn't realize right away that it's Jude holding the knife to him and not TARYN, as in, if he got home, he wouldn't be all that surprised to find TARYN waiting for him with a knife. And this is just before they're about to get married. Jude shoves Locke to the floor with a foot on his chest and just gives him a friendly reminder that if he keeps messing with her and TARYN and Carden, that there will be a punishment. The context for this moment is very interesting because it's pointed out to us that Locke doesn't know Jude as the leader of an underground spy court or as the girl that killed Valerian and a bunch of other people. He only knows her as this mortal girl that he used to date so that he could mess with her and her sister. So while Locke knows that she means what she says, it's a little hard for him to know if she actually has it in her to kill him. Jude isn't too worried though. I don't think she would mind killing Locke, and she's pretty sure that there would be a line of people just as excited to see him go, so the mission is a success. And then we get a little quality time with the Roach. He and Jude head head to the mortal world to do some prep work for TARYN's wedding, and then they go to a diner to enjoy a nice little meal, where the Roach brings up something that's been on his mind in regards to High King Carden. He says they're in an interesting position at the moment because it's a little unclear if Carden is the High King of Elfhame or if he's a spy in the Court of Shadows. He says, if he's the true High King of Elfhame, whom we are to follow to the end of days, then we've been a mite disrespectful, running the kingdom for him. But if he is play acting, then he's a spy for sure, and better than most of us, which makes him part of the Shadow Court. So, is he a spy or is he a king? And how does he see himself? It seems like right now he thinks he's a spy and Jude is the king. Jude also takes this opportunity of alone time with Rochi to ask him about the bomb. Like, does he like her too? And the answer's a hard yes, but in a very closed off way. Like, Jude asks if he likes her and he says, yeah, and so what if I do? It's not like she'd ever like me back. And then gets up and leaves. He literally walks out of the diner. And if you're thinking, oh my god, that's a little emotionally immature, isn't the Roach a grown man? Next on Jude's to-do list is to pick up Vivi, Oak, and Heather and bring them over to the fairy world, which is not gonna be pretty. No, as soon as she gets there, she realizes that Heather, Vivi's human girlfriend, still doesn't know that Vivi's a fairy, let alone that she's about to fly to Elfhame on a magical horse. Jude goes to confront Vivi about it, who doesn't think it's a big deal, and in typical older sister fashion, she thinks she has a handle on everything, even though she hasn't been to Fairyland in 5 months. The sea might try to steal baby Oak away, and her girlfriend doesn't know that she's a fairy? Yay! Jude is used to carrying the weight of practicality, so she's not feeling any more or less stressed out than usual, and she is really excited to see Vivi, Oak, and Heather, but it's time to break the news to Heather. Oh, I feel so bad. They really messed up. So they all gather in the front yard to go to Elfhame, Jude, Heather, Vivi, and Oak, and Heather thinks they're driving to Maine for the wedding, so she's like, Jude, where's your car? And Vivi says, oh no, we're flying, and pulls out a handful of weeds from the ground, says some magical words, and then they all watch as magical horses grow from the weeds. Heather shrieks. She's like, okay, either this is a joke or you're all dead to me. And then Vivi tries to stumble through an explanation, but we don't even hear much of it because we jump forward a little bit to Maddox's house. And somehow they've convinced Heather to come too. At Maddox, Oriana and Oak have a really beautiful reunion, but it's very bittersweet for Jude because she's really happy that Oak has such a loving mother in Oriana, but she's disappointed that she doesn't because Oriana is not either of their biological mother, but she chose to love Oak dearly and not to love Jude. Then Heather comes over to Jude and she's like, I'm not in a fever dream, right? Like, we're in fairyland and you're a human, right? And Jude is like, yes. Don't worry, come with me and I'll hook you up and make sure that you're gonna be safe while you're here, because it can be dangerous for humans. And honestly, Jude is really pissed that Vivi hasn't done this already, especially considering she has 2 mortal sisters that have lived in Fairyland and she should know better. This scene pisses me off too, because you didn't tell her you were fairy, then you throw it on her last minute, and you also don't try and protect her, even though you've been constantly trying to get your mortal sisters to move out of Fairyland because of how dangerous it is? What? It's a really frustrating moment, and it reminds me of Maddox, Vivi's father, who Jude recently called out for blindly ignoring the dangers of fairy because he didn't want to see them either. Something to think about. Jude heads out to get back to her duties at the palace, and the first thing she sees when she gets there is Carden being a good little spy and flirting it up with Nicasia, which is good, but also bad. And instead of dealing with her emotions about seeing Carden rizz up some other girl, Jude goes instead to the Court of Shadows to schedule out Baelkin's visit to the court, and then she heads out back to visit the one and only blacksmith Grimson. She's busy. She's working. So far, as the court's blacksmith, Grimson has made an earring for Carden, which he gave to him at the Hunter's Moon Revel, and apparently a brooch for Nicasia that gives her wings. And it's unclear if Grimson actually has a crush on Nicasia or if it's on her mother's power. or both. But keep in mind, this is the guy that didn't swear himself to Carden, so something's off here. Jude just wants to get a feel for the guy, so she tells Grimson that she's here to get a wedding present for her sister, and they decide on a pair of star and moon earrings that enhances the beauty of the person that wears them, in exchange for one of Jude's tears and also a promise that she'll tell Carden that if war breaks out, then Grimson will suit him up with weapons and armor galore. He tells Jude that he has a reputation as a master blacksmith that he needs to rebuild after being in exile for so long, and he is the guy that made the blood crown, so he has a reason to serve the High King even if he didn't make a vow to him, which is a good sign, but there's still something weird about him. Like, he loves playing tricks in games, but we don't know what his game is yet. That's the star and moon earrings for TARYN. Feeling like she has more questions than ever, Jude sits down in her rooms to try and come up with a way to protect baby Oak at TARYN's wedding, when she hears a knock on her door, and none other than a disheveled, well-kissed Carden walk in with a scroll full of secrets. It turns out that Jude's plan worked. Nicasia fessed up to Carden that Orla is, in fact, going to try something at TARYN's wedding. Jude fills Carden in on Grimson's message, but Carden's got his mind on kissing. He came straight from Nicasia to Jude, seemingly because his love for Nicasia isn't what it used to be. He reaches out an olive branch to Jude and brings up the time that they spent together under the throne when they got a little intimate, but Jude stops him and says that she only did that so that she could get Carden out of her system, and it worked. And obviously, that's a bold-faced lie. But Carden backs off, and he goes to hang out with the Court of Shadows spies, while Jude goes to find Maddox to talk about the upcoming wedding. Now that Jude knows the Sea is planning on striking during TARYN's wedding, she has tried and failed to come up with a foolproof plan to protect Oak, and she confesses this to Maddox, saying that maybe he was right, and they do need to use Oak to bait the Sea out. If they can intentionally put baby Oak into positions where he could be snatched away, then they'll be able to protect him because they're putting him into those positions in the first place. I hope that makes sense. Maddox doesn't really trust that Jude is actually going to work with him, so to convince him, she also confesses that she has a way to get information to Balekin through another prisoner, which we know is Lady Asha, Carden's mom, but she keeps that bit to herself. So they can use that connection to their advantage in the Oak wedding plan because Balekin is working with Orla. And once again, Maddox is pretty impressed with just how much Jude has her sneaky little fingers in, so for now, the two of them have a truce. The very next day, Balekin makes his visit from the Tower of Forgetting, so Jude puts her plan into action. Jude sends a message with false information to Lady Asha at the same time that Balekin is getting picked up. The note says that Jude can get Lady Asha out of the tower and away from the court after TARYN's wedding, because baby brother Oak got sick on the flight over, so he's taking a boat home after the wedding, and Lady Asha can get on the boat and get away from Carden forever. Jude knows that when Balekin gets back to the tower after he visits the palace, he will demand that Lady Asha tell him what's in the note, and then he can pass that information along to Queen Orla so that they'll attack Oak right after the wedding, and Jude and Maddox will be ready for it. When Balekin arrives at the palace, he is dressed for the occasion. Sure, he's wearing chains, but he's also showing off all of the fanciful things that he still has access to, even as a prisoner. You would think with all the build-up that Balekin has promised us with his countless letters to Carden and his scheming with the Sea, that he would come before the throne with some sort of grand proposition, but all he says to Carden is, "Do you think that you can be indolent and self-indulgent and yet succeed here as a ruler? Without me, you would be nothing. Without me, you will be nothing." Balekin fully believes that he is a messiah destined to rule over this kingdom, and Carden is nothing more than a puppy that's gotten in the way of his delusions of grandeur. Unfortunately for him, that argument doesn't really sway Carden to his side, so after a few solid minutes of insulting Carden to his face, he gets sent back to prison like the absolute nothing burger that he is. This is a good sign because it means that Carden is able to stand up against the man that raised him and hold his ground as the High King, even as he's reminded of his youth and inexperience and lack of work ethic. This is a big improvement. And then the story cuts to a moment of Jude alone in her room, practicing sword fighting stances in the mirror. Back and forth, I dance across the floor, fighting her. I strike and parry, parry and strike. I feign, I duck, I watch sweat bead on her forehead. I battle on until perspiration stains her shirt, until she's shaking with exhaustion. It's still not enough. I can never beat her. So far, this entire book has been Jude performing a balancing act, but she can only do so much, control so much, carry so much. And when you're fighting a reflection of yourself, you're not really fighting anyone at all, just your perception of reality. Jude's a perfectionist control freak that suppresses all of her emotions, and someday that bubble is going to burst. In this moment, we're left with the feeling that that might happen sooner rather than later, that this is the beginning of her unraveling. And then it's the night before the wedding! Oh my god! TARYN wants to have her last night as a single lady with all of her sisters, so even though Jude's mind is overflowing with preparations on how to make the wedding safe, she packs up her stuff, including the earrings that she got TARYN as a wedding gift, she hops on her horse, and she rides through the woods. She's riding to Maddox's house, but before she gets there, she starts to hear hoofbeats, and they're not just in the distance, they're kind of close by, and they're getting closer. 7 mysterious riders come through the woods behind her with masked faces and painted armor. Jude is still waiting for Nikasia's warning to come true and to figure out which one of her allies has betrayed her, but right now, she is alone and surrounded in a dark forest, and she has to think fast. So as they come up behind her, Jude stands up on her saddle, reaches over her head, and grabs a branch, swinging up onto it while the riders start to taunt her by shooting arrows and throwing axes. Jude pulls out 2 knives, then whips them toward the riders and grabs one of the axes that they had thrown at her before jumping through the trees when an arrow hits her in the leg. She keeps running, but she knows how screwed she is. 7 fae against 1 mortal who wasn't ready for a fight is not really an even match. So she leaps out of the trees onto one of the riders and swings her axe at them before she hits the ground hard. Now that one of them is dead, the rest of the riders start to back off like, oh shit, maybe this wasn't the best idea. So she whips another dagger at the closest rider, grabs the axe out of the dead body, and then drops to the ground as she gets charged so that she can rip open the horse's stomach with the axe. I mean, come on, that's our seneschal. Like, let's go. After that, the 4 remaining riders are like, we gotta get out of here. So they grab their friends and they race off, leaving Jude to find her own horse and also get out of the woods. But when she finds her horse, all of her bags and belongings are gone, except for her sword Nightfell. So with half an arrow still in her leg and her father's sword as a cane, she walks the rest of the way to Maddox. So, who do you think it is? Who do you think sent the riders? Everyone put your guesses in now, and we'll find out soon. Before she goes into Maddox's house, Jude washes herself off in a literal well outside so that she's not covered in blood, and when she goes in, she finds Oriana. Oriana really wants Oak to come back and live in Elfame, and I can imagine it's really hard to love your son so much, and he's still so little, and now he's forced to grow up somewhere you can't watch over him and protect him. But this moment also makes me really sad for Jude. She basically asks Jude to let Oak come back, but she knows that he can't live in Fairy right now for his own safety, so she's forcing Jude to be the adult and the bad guy in this situation by enforcing the rule that he lives in the mortal world. It's really sad. Then Jude goes to her old bedroom to recover as much as she can before she has special sister time with TARYN, and she does still have to deal with being shot in the leg. So all alone, pouring blood into the bathtub, Jude yanks the arrow out of her own thigh, and that's when Vivi comes in and sees that her sister is basically dying in the bathroom. So she grabs some thread and a needle so that Jude can sew herself back together. When Jude is bandaged and has a clean dress on, Vivi logically points out to her that this is not really a normal way to live life, and Jude logically responds that being in fairyland is the only way to protect Oak, and that right now she would probably be in just as much danger in the mortal world. So yeah, maybe Vivi is right and Jude is right, and it would probably be better if Jude asked for help more often and if Vivi paid more attention to politics, but this is what it is, and Jude is still alive, even if she's more traumatized than ever. The sisters and Heather still get to enjoy the night together, although Jude's gift for TARYN, the earrings that she got from Grimson, were stolen by the riders, so she does not get to give them to TARYN. And then finally, TARYN's wedding day has arrived. It's time to party, people. We're going to a wedding, to a wedding. Hi. The next morning, Jude wakes up in a little bit of a stupor because she has nothing to wear to the wedding today after the mysterious, murderous riders stole all of her belongings. So she actually ends up having a pretty sweet moment with Oriana, who gives her a dress to borrow. This dress is out of Jude's comfort zone. It is silvery and shiny, and it has a plunging neckline that she's not too excited about. But sorry, Jude, you have to be hot. Once the family is all dressed and ready for the occasion, they wait downstairs for the bride of the evening, and they start to gossip about how much they all hate Locke and think that this wedding is a terrible idea, which is nice. But then TARYN makes her grand entrance, and everybody stands up and acts so excited and happy for her, because even if they do hate Locke, they also love TARYN, and they desperately want her to be happy. Then they all head over to Locke's estate, which is where the wedding is being held, and Jude's plan to both protect and use little baby Oak goes into action right away. They've set up a few positions for the sea to attack Oak so that Jude can swoop in and stop them. And the first is at Locke's place. So in the carriage on the way over, they have a fake Oak in the carriage with them. And so when they arrive, they have the fake Oak get out with the rest of the family and go to the wedding party, while Jude and the real baby Oak sneak out through the carriage window and go directly into Locke's house, where the bomb is waiting for them. And nothing happens. The sea has not yet made their move. The bomb gives Jude some ointment for the arrow wound that she got in her leg last night, and then she takes the real baby Oak out to the wedding, and Jude takes a second in Locke's house to breathe, only to be interrupted by Carden. This whole post-intense makeout under the throne portion of the book is so funny to me because anytime Carden walks into a room now, Jude immediately starts to spiral out about how terrible it is that she has feelings for him that she can't ignore anymore because Carden could use those feelings against her. Like, he literally walks in, says hello, and she thinks to herself, kill him before he makes you love him. Like, come on. While she's panicking about her feelings this time, she's also worrying about Carden's safety. So she blurts out a command that Carden cannot be alone from sundown to sunup. And this pisses Carden off because he kind of thought they were moving past the whole Jude commanding him instead of trusting him phase of their relationship. So he storms off, and Jude realizes that they were not alone. War Daddy Maddox was in the hallway, and he heard their entire conversation. All of it. He says, Orla and the Undersea we will vanquish together, but when they are gone, it will be us, staring across a chessboard at each other. And when I best you, I will make sure I do it as thoroughly as I would any opponent who has shown themselves to be my equal. Uh-oh. Jude's in trouble. He is so stern in this moment that it feels like being at your friend's house and watching them get in trouble. And there's nothing she can do. He heard it himself. He knows that Jude has the ability to command Carden and that she's the one ruling this kingdom right now. At this point, the rose-colored lenses of parenthood are gone from Maddox's eyes. He finally sees her as his equal, which is vindicating, but also terrifying because now he is determined to destroy her. They leave the conversation at that and they head outside to join the rest of the wedding party that's taking place in this hedge maze on Locke's estate, and Jude gets a little bit lost in the maze because it's made with fairy magic, so the paths are constantly changing until it leads her to someone crying and alone. It's Heather, and she has the ears and the snout of a cat, like literally, and now she can no longer talk. She can only yowl and hiss. They are now paving the street directly outside of my apartment, but we continue because Jude leads Heather to the center of this hedge maze where the wedding party's being held and everybody's mingling and enjoying the event, while Locke and TARYN have a private fairy exchange of vows. Vivi runs over when she sees Jude and Cat Heather, and Jude growls out that she's going to find the person that did this to Heather and make them undo it. And it seems like a relief for her to have somewhere to point all of this built up emotion with the anxiety of protecting Oak, the conversation with Carden, the conversation with Maddox. These boys are causing her a whole lot of grief, and now she has somewhere to point that energy. Heather points out the dude that did this to her, and Jude stomps over and demands, quite scaldingly, that he undoes the enchantment, and when he does, she goes back to find Vivi comforting a human but sobbing Heather, who's saying that she wants to leave and never ever come back. Understandably. Vivi is trying to comfort her by saying, this will just be a funny story really soon, and Jude is like, no it won't. That was truly horrifying to experience. And so Vivi's solution is to use an enchantment of her own, and she glamours Heather to forget what happened and think that she's having a wonderful time at the wedding. This feels like Jude's last straw. Enchanting humans is the dirtiest, cruelest, scummiest thing a person can do in her eyes, and so she is absolutely fuming when the ghost pops up behind her and says, "Come with me. The sea has made their attack." That sobers her up a little bit because Jude looks around and sees that Oak is exactly where he's supposed to be, safe and sound, and so is Carden. So she's like, dude, what are you talking about? But the ghost says, no, the attack wasn't at the wedding, it was at Balkin's new home, the Tower of Forgetting. Ugh, bad rhyme. Jude says, okay, we'll go now, but let me say goodbye to TARYN. She did just get married, and she finds her sister in the crowd and notices that sparkling in her ears are the very same moon and star earrings that Jude was planning to gift her until they were stolen by the riders just last night. And it looks like Locke has a little bit of a limp today. Jude's attempted assassin is our very own foxy boy Locke. All right, who guessed it? I was shocked, once again. Locke thought that it would be a fun bachelor party to torture his future sister-in-law the night before his wedding into her family. What a man. What a man, what a man, what a man. So Jude is like, screw it. I'm not going to talk to them right now. Take me to the tower and give me some stuff to punch. And she follows the ghost to the Tower of Forgetting. At first glance, things at the tower seem fine, but inside they find a massacre. All of the knights are laid out on the ground with water filling their mouths, and their eyes have been gouged out and replaced by pearls. Oh, it truly makes me sick thinking about it. Jude's first thought is of Carden's mom, so she runs down to her cell, and thankfully, Lady Asha is still alive and kicking. So she opens her cell, cuts her chains, and sets her free. And Lady Asha is like, why are you just letting me go? And Jude valiantly says, for Carden. She feels like Carden should have the chance to be mad at his mom while she's still alive, because Jude would do anything to have her mom back. Oh, it kills me. Then Jude has to see if lovely Prince Balkin is still alive and breathing as well, but she finds his cell empty. Queen Orla has stolen a Greenbrier prince, and it was not the one that Jude expected. The ghost calls her name, and it pulls her out of her head, and then suddenly he's like right behind her, and behind the ghost are 3 soldiers from the sea. That's Jude's brain clicking into place, because the ghost has officially betrayed her. And all of a sudden, Nikasia's words make sense. The ghost has been working for the sea, and someone Jude trusts has betrayed her. Why? She asks him. And the ghost says, I served Prince Dane, not you. And then Jude gets whacked in the back of the head, and everything goes black. Not the ghost! I hate this part. I gotta sit down for this part. Okay. William Allingham, The Fairies. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between the night and morrow. They thought that she was fast asleep, but she was dead with sorrow. They have kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of flag leaves, watching till she wake. When Jude wakes up, she is at the bottom of the sea, and she's in a building made of coral, and she has a little underwater bed that's also made of coral and kelp, and standing at the foot of that bed is the one and only Princess Nicasia, finally in her natural element. The very first thing Miss Nicasia does is say, "This is for Carden," and punch Jude in the stomach. A very warm, watery welcome. Immediately, Jude knows that this is a terrible situation to be trapped in, so she starts to scheme as fast as she can. Like, she needs to figure out why they captured her, who exactly wanted her here, and how they're going to use her. Nicasia gives us a little bit of a clue here by saying that she wants to know what Jude is doing to control Carden. To get more info, Jude starts pissing Nicasia off by telling her that Carden likes her more than the princess, but instead of this getting her any information, it just earns her a fun little bout of drowning until she once again passes out. The next time Jude comes to, she is alone and hungry and cold and sore and tired, and she has no idea how long it's been since she was captured, but she's hoping that Carden misses her. And she's feeling a little hopeless, like more hopeless than we've ever seen Jude, and it starts to feel like this might be the kind of situation that she can't get herself out of. Eventually, a group of merfolk come in with an order to take her to dinner with the queen, so they undress her and give her a new gown and take her to dinner. This moment makes it really clear how the rest of her time in the undersea is going to go. Coming right off of Jude's sense of helplessness, we have her being held down by chains and then hands. We have her being stripped against her will and put into a sheer gown that is so revealing it's uncomfortable. The number one control freak in this series now has no bodily autonomy and no idea what's going on. And this is really reminiscent to me of the chapters in the first book that are centered around Sophie. They are dark and harsh and difficult to read, and honestly, the first time I read this book, I thought that this section was like 3/4 of the story, and it's only 2 chapters, but it is that impactful. So Jude is taken to dinner, and at the table we have Queen Orla, Princess Nicasia, and Balkan. Nicasia and Balkan are both really childish, like they're focused on revenge and the hate that they have for Jude, while Orla is giving strength, scheming, royalty, and dare I say, mother. I feel like I have to lighten the mood somehow. The first step in Orla's plan is to milk Jude for all of the information that she can, but no one at this table knows that Jude has a special resistance to fairy magic. If we could please take a trip down memory lane to when Jude became Prince Dane's spy, and he gave her the gift of resistance to fairy glamours and enchantments. So while a normal mortal would need to have some sort of charm of protection, Jude can be butt-ass naked and fairy magic still will not affect her. So Queen Orla sees Jude's practically naked body and believes that she can enchant Jude into telling her everything she wants to know. And Jude realizes that she's gonna have to put on a little show if she wants to keep her secrets intact. It's time for an Oscar-worthy performance. Orla enchants Jude to think of her, Nicasia, and Balkan as Jude's loved ones and people that she'll be loyal to no matter what, but also that she won't tell anyone about that love or loyalty. And then she also kind of throws it in Balkan's face just for a little fun by saying like, "See? That's how it's done." Now let's get into our first line of questioning. Orla's first question is, "Tell me about yourself, little minnow." Nothing interesting. Nicasia's first question, "Did you kiss Carden?" Immediately followed by Balkan's first question, "Is that important?" Yes, Balkan, it is. Jude says, "Well, yes, I kissed him more than once, but he doesn't love me." Ugh. This silly girl. With Nicasia being heartbroken but satiated, we get into the line of questioning about Oak and Maddock. Like, why did Maddock never tell Balkan about Oak being an heir when they worked together? And would you take us to Oak if we asked you to? Jude tries to answer with the truth as much as she can, but of course with questions like, would you take us to your baby brother that you screwed your entire family over to protect, she just has to lie and say yes and try to be believable. Then Orla turns to her daughter Nicasia and says something that makes their position a little more clear to Jude. She says, "The Grimsing creature, you really believe he can make a new crown?" This is horrifying for a few reasons. Now we know that the sea has two main paths forward other than war. Option 1, steal away baby Oak, raise him under the sea, and marry him to Nicasia. Then eventually they'll have little Greenbrier babies that could wear the blood crown and rule over the land while still being loyal to Orla. This could take a while, like multiple generations potentially, but it would still be a viable way for Orla to have control over both the sea and the land. Or option 2, little Miss Nicasia has been flirting it up with Grimson the blacksmith, who we know created the blood crown and could potentially create a new blood crown that's instead tied to Orla's bloodline, which would make it so she doesn't even have to deal with baby Oak at all. This is especially scary because Grimson is a free agent since he never swore any oaths to Carden, so technically he could start working on a new blood crown now. Although this Grimson plan is terrifying to hear, it sparks something back to life in Jude, who thinks, oh my god, I know their plan now. If I can get out of here, I can stop them. Maybe there is hope. Orla's last question is about Carden. She wants to know what Carden promised Jude to get her to put the crown onto his head. And up to this point, the question has always been the reverse. What did Jude do to convince Carden to take her to the top? But Orla sees Jude as the kingmaker that she is. Jude has to lie because she can't give away her biggest secret, that she controls the High King. So she just says that Carden promised her a position that would be respected and feared. Balekin is like, you have to be joking. You betrayed your family and put Carden on the throne for a job so you could clock in 9 to 5? But Orla points out that that's basically what they're offering Grimson, and he's happy to help, so it's kind of valid. Once the meal is over, Nicasia takes Jude to her new living quarters. She's no longer staying in that coral bedroom. She is now going to live in a cage that she has been enchanted to believe is a luxurious bedroom with a steaming pot of tea in the center, and it's actually seawater intended to make Jude sick. Because Jude isn't actually enchanted, she lies on the floor ignoring the seawater and tries to get some sleep, and this is when her torture really begins. The next time she wakes up, Jude has a new problem. As we know, she's been poisoning herself for quite some time now to build up a resistance to those poisons, and like any drugs, they've become addicting, and with no access to those drugs, she's going through some pretty serious withdrawals. Days go by with no food, no water, no drugs, and Jude starts to think about Matic and how he had to go through some pretty intense conditions when he was at war. And she thinks about Carden and how when he was growing up as a royal prince, he had access to everything he wanted except for love. And she just tries to survive. Eventually, she's given some food, but as time passes, she is questioned and beaten and enchanted to think that she's drunk or full when she asks for food, and she has to pretend to forget the things that they tell her to, all while going without a glimpse of sunlight and staying in a cage that's built into the island that she lives on top of. And she thinks, sometimes, when lying on the cold stone floor, I wonder if there's a limit to what I will let them do, if there is something that would make me fight back, even if it dooms me. If there is, that makes me a fool, but maybe if there isn't, that makes me a monster. Oh my god. One day, Jude is alone with Balekin, and he questions her on Carden's motives to get the throne. He doesn't understand why Carden would want to rule, because he only sees Carden as someone that enjoys cruelty and games. Jude has to lie, so she suggests that maybe it was to get their father's attention, and Balekin is like, oh hey, that's actually not the worst thought. And then the conversation shifts to a more uncomfortable place. Balekin starts to ask who Jude would prefer, him or Carden, and if she would kill Carden for him. And Jude, who is a shell of herself at this point and so malnourished that she can barely string a thought together, just tells him what he wants to hear. Balekin steps closer to her and commands that she kiss him. Jude is confused, but of all the torture that she's endured so far, this isn't as bad as being beaten, so she does it quickly, but then he says, now kiss me as though I were Carden. So she does. I don't think I need to explain how evil and disgusting this is. At this point, we all know that Balekin is a vile creature. The very next day, Jude is informed that Carden has made a deal for her return. Jude is ecstatic but confused because none of the commands that she gave him would have forced him to make this deal, which means that he did it of his own free will. And that is not super convincing to Jude. She kind of thinks this might be a trick. Balekin pays her another private visit to tell her that he's moving back into Hollow Hall. And when he gets there, he's gonna give her some sort of signal, and then she needs to go to Hollow Hall for specific instructions. But the general plan is that Jude needs to kill Carden as soon as she can, because Grimson cannot make a new blood crown until Carden is dead. Then Jude eats her last meal of fish and wine and goes to sleep for the last time in the undersea. It's no trick, people. Jude is headed back above the water, and it's a very grand procession, okay? It's got magic creatures, giant turtles, pearls and seaweed galore, and they are all headed above the water to meet with the people of the land. As soon as they crest the top of the ocean, Jude can see the folk of the land, and they are dressed in armor. They've got archers in the trees and angry faces. Her father and her king are standing in the front, and when Carden sees the dilapidated state that Jude is in, he's furious, but there's nothing that he can do to change the situation now, so he has his guards lead her to the land, and he accepts Balekin as the new ambassador to the sea. He is officially moving back into Hollow Hall. Jude is stuffed into a carriage and forcibly taken back to Maddox's house, even though she wants to go to the palace, but for the first time ever, she is too weak and too tired to fight back. At Maddox, she finally eats and sleeps, and then TARYN wakes her up to check on her after she manages to pass out on the floor for like 2 days. And it's strange to see TARYN again because she's married now, and Jude hasn't really had a second to think about it because she was kidnapped at the wedding. TARYN was terrified for Jude, but they don't have any sort of major emotional reunion because frankly, Jude is too exhausted to feel anything right now. Her sister fills her in a little bit, telling her that Carden and Maddox had to come to this unlikely understanding after Jude was taken, and also Heather, Oak, and Vivian are all back safe in the human world. And then Jude goes back to sleep. But duty never stops calling because soon enough, Jude is woken up by an angry visitor. The representative from the Court of Termites, Dulcamara, is here because Jude still owes the Court of Termites a favor for having help in getting the crown onto Carden's head. And apparently, they know what they want now. So Jude meets with the representative in Orla's parlor, and Dulcamara is not happy. Apparently, part of the deal that Carden made to get Jude back from the undersea was to allow Queen Orla to attack the Court of Termites, and then to order Lord Royben, the Lord of the Court of Termites, not to retaliate against the sea. And Carden also didn't send any help to the Court of Termites, which, because they're a court that has sworn themselves to Carden, he's supposed to do. This attack led to Lord Royben's girlfriend getting really, really hurt, and Jude feels awful because she feels like it's her fault since this attack was a result of the deal that was made to save Jude, and so she wants to help and send them aid, but if she does, then that would break the deal and start a war with the undersea, so she's kind of stuck, at least until she talks to Carden. The representative, Dulcamara, officially tells Jude what the favor is that she is now required to fulfill in order to repay them for helping out with the crown. Jude must kill Prince Balekin. And Jude is like, I can't do that. He's the ambassador to the undersea now. If I do that, then I'm starting a war. And Dulcamara says, okay, then start a war. That's not my problem. After Dulcamara leaves, Jude is like, okay, it's time to get back into action, so she starts strapping herself up with knives and getting ready to sneak out of Maddox from the balcony. But we have to remember here that Jude is really weak from her time in the undersea. Like, she is horrified by how weak her muscles are and how gaunt her face is. She's not in tip-top shape. So all of the spying and scheming and sneaking is gonna be a little bit harder than it used to be. Regardless, she still throws herself off of a second-story balcony, then takes a deep, fresh breath of ocean-free air and makes her way to the palace to finally talk to King Carden. As the High King Seneschal, Jude should be able to just walk into the palace through the front doors, but when she gets there, the guards stop and tell her that she is banned from the palace on Daddy Maddox's orders. Daddy Maddock knows about her ability to command Carden, so to Jude, this could only mean that Maddock found a way to get Carden onto his side so that they can kick Jude out of the picture, and then Carden can be the High King all on his own. No Jude required. So she thinks, time to reevaluate. I'll go to the Court of Shadows and figure out a new plan. So she heads to the side of the palace where there's a secret entrance and finds that it's been completely destroyed. The Court of Shadows' secret lair has been buried. Okay. New plan. Jude sees Val Morin, the old seneschal who told her that juggling is hard, and she's like, hey dude, could you get me into the palace? But he sort of just rambles on about how he met Eldred and swore off all of humanity, so long story short, no, he cannot help her. Alright, new plan. Hollow Hall. Hollow Hall is not the party central that it once was, now that Baelkin's loyalties are to the sea, and also he's not allowed to enlist human servants under Carden's law, so it's just Jude and Baelkin in this very haunting manner. Jude tells Baelkin that she can't stab Carden to death for him if she doesn't have access to the palace, so Baelkin tells her that there's a masquerade ball coming up, and she can sneak in then to have her opportunity. But being the sensible murderer that he is, Baelkin says maybe don't stab Carden to death in a room full of his loyal followers and guards, so I'm actually going to give you a vial of poison that you can use to kill him instead. And he says, tell me that you're mine, Jude. Ugh. Ugh. Jude replies, I am your creature, Prince Baelkin. Do with me what you will. I am yours. This is not the first time that she's been the creature of a Greenbrier. Will it be her last? With nowhere else to go, Jude decides to spend the night sleeping in Carden's old room from when he stayed at Hollow Hall, and she wakes up in the morning, puts on some of his old clothes from the closet, and it's go time. She's already making her next plan, even though she has no place to live and no food in her body. I don't know how she does it. Her plan of attack is to sneak into the palace by breaking into one of the windows. We haven't really talked about this yet, but this is fairyland, so the palace is literally built into a giant hill, so there are windows on the top that Jude could smash through. There are some challenges though, like the hill is really steep, like stab a dagger into it to pull yourself up kind of steep, and also there are guards everywhere, and it's been 2 seconds since Jude got back from being tortured under the sea for a month, so she's a little weak right now. So it's not easy, but she makes it to the top of the hill, smashes through a window, and ends up in Carden's old rooms. The one where Nicasia almost shot him with a crossbow bolt, and also the one with a passageway to the High King's chambers, aka Carden's new rooms. Jude creeps through the passageway and over to Carden's bed, where he's sleeping, and aggressively covers his mouth like she's trying to kill him. He wakes up scrambling like, oh my god, who's trying to murder me right now? When he realizes it's Jude, he's like, oh, sick, and he lies back down, so Jude is like, oh, this idiot, and she leans over him and says, they sent me to kill you. Like, stop flirting, okay? Of course, Carden is like, ooh, and pulls her into the bed next to him. Jesus. And then they casually catch up a little. There's a lot to talk about, like Orla and Baelkin's plan to murder Carden, and Jude thinking that Maddock and Carden were secret besties now, when the reality is that he was just scheming by himself again and trying to control everyone, and the whole Court of Termites thing that Carden did to get Jude back, even though he probably shouldn't have done that. And it's a very sweet moment. This is their reunion after she's been brought back, and Jude is never really sure how a conversation with Carden is going to go, especially with how many secrets there are between them right now. But while they're talking, she thinks, he speaks with a softness in his voice I am utterly unprepared for. Like, if she could just see how completely obsessed with her that he is. Come on. Well, he desperately wants her to know. It's like this last month made Carden realize he doesn't care about this game that they're playing, and he doesn't want to play, he just wants to be honest. So he's like, hey, I actually have a speech that I've kind of been working on for the last month that I've been wanting to tell you. I'm just kidding, but he does have a speech. He tells her about how when he was little, he realized there was nothing he could do to get his father's attention, so he decided instead that he would get all of his father's hate and be everything that his father didn't want. He says, if he thought I was bad, I would be worse. And then he got sent to Balkan, who just saw him as this animal that could be tamed into whatever monster Balkan wanted him to be. And Balkan harbored Carden's cruelty and anger, and he says, I wasn't kind, Jude, not to many people, not to you. I wasn't sure if I wanted you or if I wanted you gone from my sight so that I would stop feeling as I did, which made me even more unkind. But when you were gone, truly gone beneath the waves, I hated myself as I never have before. And he says, I like you, and I know you like me, but I also know that you kind of hate me, but I also know that every time I've ever done anything right, it's because I've asked myself what you would do. So, yeah, hearts in the chat for Jude. I don't know. It's too much. Jude cannot believe this is happening. They've never been this open and honest with each other before, and she's not sure how to take it, but she doesn't have a chance to respond before a crossbow is in her face. What? Yep. The bomb and the roach are here, and they are sure that Jude has been sent here by Balkan to murder the king, which she has, but they don't know about the gesh that Dane put on Jude that protects her from fairy magic. They empty her pockets, and they find the vial of poison that Balkan gave to her, and they're like, explain this. So Jude says, yeah, that's the vial of poison that Balkan gave me to murder Carden because they want him dead so that Grimson can make a new blood crown. And the spies are like, huh. That's pretty good, but prove that you can't be glamored. Carden, try and glamour her. So Carden, dressed only in a robe, stands in front of Jude and says, crawl to me, in his best fairy magic voice. Jude does not. So with their loyalty confirmed, they move on to being sad about the ghost's betrayal and the destruction of the Court of Shadows' secret lair. Unfortunately, the ghost disappeared, pun a little bit intended, and nobody knows where he is, so it's time to plan for this masquerade party that's coming up. Jude says, oh, well, my plan was just to follow along with what Balkan wants in killing Carden, but then to use the first chance that I get to stab Balkan in his stupid face. And the roach says, oh my god, I missed you. And then very sweetly, he tells Jude, hey, you did a really good job surviving what you went through and coming out on the other side. Oh my god, I love it. Carden steps in to say, hey, maybe we don't kill Balkan. He is literally the ambassador to the sea. And Jude is like, why not? He wants you to be dead. And she's also thinking about the fact that Dulcamara and the Court of Termites have said that she has to kill Balkan to repay them, but she doesn't say that part out loud. Then the bomb jumps in to say, hey, we should kill that stinky little Grimson guy too so that he can't make a new blood crown. And the roach is like, oh my god, you beautiful genius, I'll go kill him right now. And Carden is, again, like, no murder, you guys are insane. He says, someone tries to betray the High King, murder. Someone gives you a harsh look, murder. Someone disrespects you, murder. Someone ruins your laundry, murder. How about you all chill out and sit down, because we're not murdering Balkan and we'll just force Grimson to be on our side. Also, he says, look, I've been doing a little research on the history between the land and the sea, and I found out that if we go to war, it won't just be ugly, it will be catastrophic. As in, no one will win, we will all only lose. And that means that Orla can't want war either. What she wants is to put someone onto the throne that she can control. And that perfectly lines up with everything Jude learned while she was under the sea, but they don't have a solution. Jude says, okay, awesome. So we either have to live through Orla's deadly games or fight a war that we can't physically win. Sounds great. And Carden says, or we show her that I'm not going anywhere. She can't have her war or her ruler because I'm in charge. But that's going to be a little hard because am I in charge? Carden sees himself as a spy, not a king, so this is going to be difficult. Before the masquerade, Jude needs to get a dress and a mask, so she heads over to Mandrake Market, which is where you go for all of your fantastical wares. Also, I wrote in my notes that the word wares completely belongs to Trisha Paytas. cicadas in my mind, and the Trish Like Fish Tavern would fit right in at Mandrake Market.
We don't like fish around these parts. You think you're a fish? Go back in the water.
I don't know. So Jude finds this creepy human mask that she gets to be painted like her own face and a dress in a walnut. And then she heads back to where she's going to be staying for now, Hollow Hall. And as she walks back there, she avoids tide pools and ocean spray as much as she can while thinking about the enormous power of the ocean that she has had to face head on. Balekin is waiting for her at Hollow Hall, and he tells her to get ready for the party, so she gets all dressed up and she puts the poison that he expects her to use on Carden into one of her dress pockets. Before they leave for the party, Balekin makes sure once again that Jude is ready to kill Carden, and then he takes a moment to bask in the future of Elfame with him as the new High King, as he's so sure that it will happen, and Jude thinks about all of the harm that he has caused and the evil that he's done, and she really wishes that she could fulfill her favor to the court of termites right now. Alright, so this masquerade is actually being held for Lord Royben as kind of a sorry we let your court get attacked and didn't do anything to help you out masquerade. So we will finally get to talk to Lord Royben face to face. But first, Jude has a little reunion with Foxy Locke. We haven't seen him in a while, not since Jude realized that he was the one who tried to kill her in the woods with all his buddies as a little pre-wedding warm-up. So Jude is like, hey, I know what you did, and I'm a little busy right now trying to save the kingdom again, but I will be talking to you later. Lord Royben steps in to get that face-to-face time with Jude, and he says, hey, I know the reason we got attacked and didn't get any help was because of Balekin and not you, but my girlfriend barely survived, so if you don't kill him soon, things are gonna get really dark. And if that's not stressful enough, Jude looks up to see that Oriana and Matic have joined the party, and Carden's mom. Lady Asha changed her mind about running away and has rejoined the court, which gives Jude a very bad feeling. And that's not enough either, because then the Living Council get in her face and they're like, where's Carden? Where's the king? Where's the king? And she's like, I don't know. How would I? Matic banned me from the castle. And then Carden walks in, and he is drunk. Violently drunk, like maybe the drunkest that Jude has ever seen him. He's falling over, he's laughing, he gets onto a table to sing a song for the court, and then basically tells Lord Royben to F off because he can't change anything. And then Matic stomps over to Jude and says, I will wreck you if you don't take this crown off this idiot and put it onto your brother's head. Join me or die. And Jude says, well, Dad, working with you will always be working for you. So thanks, but no thanks. And then she goes to deal with her belligerently drunk king. She is so awesome! When Carden sees her, he's like, Jude, my sweet, wonderful Jude, let's dance. Get up here, let's dance. Jude says, dude, you need to get it together. This party's actually important, okay? I literally command you to knock it off. But Carden just says, okie dokie, and then he kisses her in front of everyone. Have you ever had someone kiss you in a crowded room? She's like, okay, this is a little bit mortifying, but also a little bit awesome. But then her spy instincts kick in, and all at once, months and months of poisoning herself finally comes in handy, because in his kiss, she tastes the poison of wraithberry. Little Carden didn't mess up his royal duties. He's not drunk. He's been poisoned. This changes things. New plan. Get Carden out of here and find the bomb, who knows much more about healing than Jude does. Jude goes to find a guard and has him send water and towels to her room, and then chases after a stumbling Carden, who is now surrounded by the Living Council. The council is like, Jude, what's going on? But she just says, don't worry about it. So sorry, we're gonna head out for the night. Unfortunately, the Court of Termites representative Dulcamara is there, and she says, seriously? You throw us a party to say, sorry we let your court get absolutely wrecked, and then you're not even gonna stay for the whole thing? And then Balekin slides in and says, actually, I think the king has been poisoned. Ugh. That is when Balekin's plan clicks into place for Jude. Balekin never wanted her to poison Cardan at this party. He wanted her to carry the poison in her pocket so that Balekin could poison him and then say, "Oh my god, the king's been poisoned," and pin the whole thing on Jude when everyone found out that she had poison in her pocket. Unfortunately for Balekin, Jude has a brain and has been lying to him this whole time about being enchanted by his fairy magic. Rest in peace, Dane. Not really, Dane kinda sucks, but anyway. Balekin says, "Jude, empty your pockets." And Jude looks in his nasty little eyes and says, "No, the king is drunk and we're gonna leave now." Mind blown. Balekin says, but he doesn't want to leave the party, and he tries to use his status as a former heir and the current ambassador to the sea to say, "Jude Duerte, you will leave the High King's side." But a very confused, very sick Cardan says, "What? She will not?" And he's the High King, so he kind of wins that one. Jude scoops him up and they skedaddle out of there. She drags him to her room and puts him in front of the fireplace and just tries to do what she can to help. So she forces him to down a bunch of water and tries to keep him awake by talking to him about things like his mom and how she's really surprised to see Lady Asha in the court again. And we have found another similarity between these two in the form of mommy issues, because even though Cardan hates his mom, he also loves her. So they bond over the fact that neither of them really had great parents, or dead parents in Jude's case. But then Cardan stops and says, "Jude, you need to leave." And she's like, "What do you mean? I'm trying to help." And he says, "Because I'm about to puke." It's just so honeymoon phase, you know? The bomb finally runs into the room with some clay to help, but it's looking pretty bad. Like, there are only two ways that Cardan is going to survive this. One, he uses his connection to the land as the High King of Elfame to heal him because he is intrinsically connected to the land as the king. Or he can take an antidote. The problem with the land option is that Cardan doesn't see himself as the High King. Just like how the Roach brought it up when he was at the diner with Jude, Cardan sees himself as a spy while Jude rules the kingdom. And because he doesn't see himself as a leader, he cannot use the power of the land. He doesn't believe in himself. He doesn't even believe in the him that believes in him. So that means that it's time for a Balekin-Jude showdown, because Balekin has sent word that he has the antidote and he's willing to trade it to Jude for the blood crown. Dun dun! Obviously, Jude isn't just gonna hand over the blood crown, so she puts on this sick spy cloak with like a giant hood and a new mask, and she grabs the poison that Balekin gave her earlier and tucks it in her pocket, and with shaking hands, she leaves a dying Cardan on the floor to go confront his older brother. I'm sorry, but I cannot do the Balekin scene standing up. Balekin is waiting for Jude in the palace gardens, and it feels like everything in this series has been leading up to this moment. All the way from the coup that Balekin staged to murder his family, to how he tormented Cardan and now Jude, and how he's behind Orla attacking the land without repercussions, and now finally he is standing face to face with Jude. There are enough people in the gardens that it doesn't seem like this will be a really big fight because there would be too many witnesses. So Jude says, "Let me lay down the plan for you. I'm gonna drink the poison that's in my pocket that you gave me, and then I'm gonna drink 1 dose of the antidote that you have. And if it works, then I'll know that you're not lying, and I'll take the other dose of the antidote, bring it back to Cardan, and give you the blood crown." We have to remember at this point that Jude is no longer resistant to poison damage, because when she was in the undersea, she had no access to her poisons and completely went through withdrawals until it was all out of her system. So taking this poison right now is actually dangerous if the antidote doesn't work. Balekin says, "Fine, if you want to poison yourself, be my guest." And she immediately downs the vial of poison, and then Balekin comes over to baby bird 1 dose of the antidote into her mouth, but instead of swallowing the antidote, she spits it back out into the now empty vial of poison. Is Jude dead now? Did she just effectively kill herself? No, she didn't, because she never drank any poison. She had emptied the vial out and refilled it with water, then lied to Balekin's stupid little behind, and now she has the antidote for Cardan and doesn't have to give Balekin the blood crown. And that's what we call a switcheroo. Balekin's like, "What?" And Jude's like, "Haha, gotcha, dummy. I am so much better and smarter than you." And it's true. Instead of saying, ugh, you're so right, and jumping off of a cliff like we all want him to, Balekin pulls out his sword. It's time for a duel. It's the 10 duel commandments. Okay, but it is an interesting scene, especially if you think about it from Balekin's perspective. As Jude kindly points out to us, Balekin has only ever seen her as a weak, worthless human girl because of his bias against her, but also because Jude has fed into that bias. He has always perceived himself to be in a position of power over Jude, even when he wasn't, like when he thought he had control of the guards in the Tower of Forgetting, or when he thought that he could enchant Jude to do whatever he wanted in the Undersea. Jude has never shown him what she's really capable of, so when he's sitting here saying that she's trashy and weak and greedy, she's like, no, I'm not. I'm literally smarter, stronger, and more capable than you, and you're a coward and a traitor. And for Balekin, it's impossible to reconcile what he's hearing and the version of her that he's perceived up to this point, which is awesome, because it's almost like a parallel for the way that men see women in the real world. What? It's almost like all of the men that have been impactful on Jude's life, from Locke to Maddox to Dane to even Randallin, have also underestimated her in the same way, and they haven't even always been her enemy. What? And then Jude immediately beats Balekin's ass. She only has a dagger while he has a sword, and Cardan is also dying in her bedroom right now, so she knows she has to make this quick. Balekin lunges toward her, and she goes to disarm him by grabbing the arm that he's holding his sword with, and while he's distracted with that, she drives her dagger toward his neck, and as he starts to say the words, "I surrender," her knife goes straight into his throat. Balekin Greenbrier is finally dead, and Jude feels once again like a monster. We can never be fully happy in this series. It is kind of difficult when your king and your crush says, hey, please don't kill my older brother, but you were born and raised to be a killer, so you can't help it. That awkward moment when you kill your boyfriend's brother. We're back in Jude's room, and something is amiss. Cardan says something strange. He says, your dress, you put it back on. Jude has not changed. She's still wearing the same dress from the party, so she's like, okay, what happened? And Cardan says, what do you mean? I granted you the boon that you wanted. Is your father safe? Then he lays out the order of events as he saw them. Jude and the bomb leave to meet with Balekin. The bomb comes back into the room with the antidote and says that Jude will be there in 1 sec. Then she leaves, and then Jude comes in a second later, just like the bomb said, and says, hey, so, Daddy Maddox needs to be released from his oaths to you as your Grand War General, because he needs to take half of the army and get the heck out of Dodge. And Cardan's reply was, wow, Jude, I'm still really sick, and it's only been a few seconds since I drank the antidote, but you look really pretty, and you have these almost magical earrings on. And also, I trust you with my life and my heart and my soul, and I really want you to like me back. So yeah, do whatever. Your dad's free from me. I totally trust you, fully and completely. And then Jude said thanks and walked out, but then Jude walked back in and said, what the heck's going on? Are we catching on? It was TARYN with the earrings that Jude was supposed to give her for her wedding, but that Locke actually gave her after trying to murder Jude. And now TARYN is doing their father's bidding like the good little daughter she is, and the good little daughter that Jude is not. I love them. I hope you know that I do realize how awful TARYN is, especially in this moment when she's picking a side in her family and she chooses Maddox over her twin sister, and really her older sister too, who's always been super anti-Maddox. So I don't think she's making a good choice here. I don't support her decision, but I think it's really awesome that she gets to be just as manipulative as Jude does in this series, and I understand her wanting to help her dad. I think it's a universal human experience to want to be loved, especially by your parents. Jude fought for years to be the exact daughter that Maddox wanted her to be, and it was even pointed out to us earlier that she was his favorite. And that means that TARYN wasn't. And then there's Vivi, who is his biological heir, and that matters to Maddox. So he's going to love her no matter what. TARYN doesn't have either of those connections to their dad. It's not like Maddox never loved TARYN, she just wasn't special. She was never the favorite. And when she decided to take a different path from Jude, who was the favorite, she ended up with Locke, and would you look at that? he also wanted to choose her sister. Again, TARYN is never special and never the favorite. So I think she's making a huge mistake and doing something pretty bad, but I also fully understand how she's driven to this bad decision by the internal drive to be seen as who you are and deemed worthy. And if you hate me for that, then I understand, okay? I'm all love for everyone. Except for Locke. Jude is not all love. She is pretty mad that her sister and her dad have made a war move officially against her directly. So it's time to get back to our regularly scheduled planning and scheming. Jude sends Carden back to his room to get some rest, and she sits down to think things over, and it's not looking good. Maddox is gonna be a big problem considering none of the other courts know that he just quit, so they might think that his orders are still coming from the High King. Bad. Plus, he has half of the army now, and Carden doesn't have a grand general for the half army that's still at the palace. Bad. Queen Orla is still knocking on the land's doorstep, and Jude is pretty sure it won't take that long for Carden to figure out that she just killed his older brother and the ambassador to the sea, which is a big no-no. Speaking of, a guard comes to Jude's room to tell her that Carden has requested her over in his room, like now. So she's like, oh god, okay, didn't take him very long to figure out that I killed his brother. And when she gets to his room, she finds Carden sitting very businesslike in a little chair. I'm imagining legs crossed. And he says, hey, so listen, I think we should revisit this bargain that's between us where you have complete and total control over all of my actions and I have no say, even though I'm the High King of Elfame. And this is another one of Jude's nightmares come to life. She has a lot of these moments. But he says, listen, this just isn't working because you don't trust me and I'm not gonna let you control me for longer than the original time of our deal, and you're also not ready to put the crown onto Oak's head. And he says, we need a plan that's gonna make us both happy. Carden is completely willing to work with Jude as long as there's trust between them. And he points out that a whole bunch of their new problems, especially regarding TARYN and Maddox, came up because Carden was trying to prove to Jude that he trusted her without being commanded by her. Plus, he says, I'm not the worst at this whole king thing. This is scary territory for Jude because controlling Carden while he's on the throne is kind of her entire plan to turn Fairyland into a safe place for her little brother and also for her to have like an insane amount of power. And she cannot physically see a solution to their warring interests no matter how hard she tries. And then Carden says something that just might work. He says, I can't say it. He says, marry me. Become the queen of Elfame. I need a minute. Man, does that sound good to Jude. Not even because it would be with Carden, but because she would have ultimate power with no checks or balances. No hiding behind anyone else's throne. Power in her own right. That's almost too good to be true. And Carden would be stuck with Jude for a very long time. So Jude is like, this doesn't make any sense. But Carden says, dude, it would be political. You would have your own power, and we could still put the crown onto Oak's head in like 10 years or whatever, and then I would be free, okay? Win-win, babe. Let's do it. Jude is looking for a trick here, and Carden says, I am being so serious, I would marry you right here and right now. So she starts to consider it. She thinks mortal girls do not become queens of Fairyland. I imagine what it would be like to have my own crown, my own power. Maybe I wouldn't have to be afraid of loving him. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe I would become a little bit magic. This is literally her dream come true, and she almost couldn't fathom this solution because it would make her too happy. Oh my god, Jude! So finally she says, okay, bet. Let's get married. Screw it. And Carden's like, yes! So she asks, what do we do? And Carden says, we just have to say our vows to each other. I'll go first. He says, I, Carden, son of Eldred, High King of Elfame, take you, Jude Duarte, mortal ward of Maddox, to be my bride and my queen. Let us be wed until we wish for it to be otherwise, and the crown has passed from our hands. and then he pulls off the ruby ring that he stole from her before the Hunter's Moon revel, and he slides it onto her finger. They're both feeling a little surprised and bashful that this is happening right now, and then Jude says, I, Jude Duerte, take Carden, High King of Elfame, to be my husband. Let us be wed until we don't want to be, and the crown has passed from our hands. And, in typical Carden dramatics, a whole bunch of flowers bud throughout the High King's chambers. And only 7 months into their 1-year deal, Jude safely removes her power of command from Carden, because now she has power on her own. They just got married! When Jude wakes up the next morning, a messenger has come to deliver Carden some news. He tells the king that Baelkin has been murdered and Queen Orla has come to demand justice for her departed sea ambassador. This is not Carden's favorite news to get, especially on his first day as co-ruler of the Fae realm, so he's a little cold toward Jude this morning, like, thanks for filling me in on the murder of my older brother before we got married. Let's go deal with Queen Orla, wifey. This doesn't leave Jude feeling super confident about her status as the new High Queen of Elfame. This is her first day on the job, and no one knows that she's been hired. And she has no idea what it's like to rule beside a version of Carden that has unchecked power. That is scary. But this is the end. This is where we will answer the question of whether or not there will be war between the land and the sea. Will our new monarch, fresh off of their wedding vows, be able to hold peace between two of the most powerful entities in all of Fairyland? We'll find out on today's episode of When Jude and Carden and the Living Council and 24 knights ride to the shore of their island. They find Queen Orla and her daughter Nicasia waiting for them in the water. It's clear that more sea folk are hidden just under the water, and they're prepared for a fight. Orla demands justice for the murder of her ambassador, Baelkin, and now that Carden knows Jude murdered him, there's nothing that he can do to pretend that it wasn't her. Jude is feeling sick, not only because she is once again facing the ocean, where she was just tortured and controlled for an entire month, and where she might be again if this goes badly, but also because Carden has not said a word about what he's planning, and he's not very happy with her right now, and there's nothing that she can do to stop him because she no longer has control over his actions. So she might be the Queen of Elfame now, but nobody knows, so she has no power in this moment. When Carden refuses to give Jude over to Queen Orla for the murder of Baelkin, Orla threatens to start a war, and she points out that they are standing on an island that's surrounded by water that Orla has complete control over, and she shows that control with a fanciful display of power as waves crash onto the shore and whirlpools form all around them. But Carden doesn't seem too worried about it. He's like, are you challenging me to a duel right here and now? And Orla's like, so what if I am? So Carden reminds her that they might be surrounded by water, but at the bottom of every ocean is land, and the land belongs to him. And then he stretches out his hand, and all around them sand starts to rise from the ground, and the water around them starts to churn again, but this time it's Carden's doing. And soon it starts to boil, sending the sea folk scampering for safety from the hot water. Princess Nicasia gets pulled under the surface of the water, and then she rises again on new land that's been pulled from the bottom of the ocean. Carden is free from Jude, and he is the High King of Elfame. He is the land, and the land is him, and no one can deny that now. Not Jude, and certainly not Queen Orla. High King Carden, baby. Jude realizes that this Carden is different than the one she knew before she was kidnapped. Now he has autonomy and control and confidence in his ability to rule over Elfame as the High King. And that's dangerous. And his show of power isn't over yet, because a tree begins to sprout from the land of this new island he's created, and it wraps itself around Nicasia, holding her there as a prisoner. He says, I am the High King of Elfame, and I mislike being given orders. Sorry, Jude. I think you've made a monster. Then Carden demands that the sea and the land go back to respecting the same treaty they had when Eldred was king and when Mab was queen before him. Queen Orla really doesn't have a choice here, so she says, fine, you get what you want. No war and a treaty of peace and Nicasia's safety. and then they agree to have Nicasia stay on the land as the new ambassador to the sea. Jude's not that excited about this development because she knows that Nicasia is trouble, but she can't really step in and interject right now. You know, Cardan's a little busy. After that, it seems like everything should be settled, but then Cardan says, "As the High King, I must lead, but I also must be just." And all of the attention turns back onto Jude, Kingmaker and Ambassador Killer. Cardan asks her to deny that she killed Baelkin, which she cannot because she did. So Cardan passes judgment as her king. He says, "I exile Jude Duerte to the mortal world until and unless she is pardoned by the crown. Let her not step 1 foot in Fairy or forfeit her life." Jude has officially been kicked out of Fairy, and in her mind, her marriage is in question. She screams out, "You can't do this to me. I'm the queen of Fairy." And she knows that Cardan can't deny this because it's true, they got married and he can't lie. But he doesn't try to deny it. He just laughs. So everyone around them laughs. Like, who is this crazy mortal girl? Cardan smiles at Jude and she remembers how much she hates him, and she is so mad at herself for forgetting that hatred. And then a guard is at her side, taking her away from Elfame, her home, her kingdom. And she watches as Cardan steps onto this new island that he's just pulled from the sea with his bare hands. And he says, "If Insweel is the Isle of Woe, Insmire the Isle of Might, and Insmore the Isle of Stone, then let this be Inseer, Isle of Ash." The end. Except not really, because this is Holly Black, guys. We have an epilogue. Now Jude, the exiled queen of Fairyland, is sitting on the couch watching Yuri on Ice, a classic, and eating a good old plate of fish sticks. She now lives in the mortal world with Vivi and Oak. Not Heather, though. After her visit to the fairy world, she had a lot of questions, and when she figured out that Vivi glamoured her, it was all too much, so she moved out, and Vivi has been trying to get her back ever since, and it's not going well. But back to Jude, who is not feeling great about life at the moment. Cardan is denying her royalty by omission. She has to train Oak to be ready for the crown because she wants him to be a good ruler, but she also doesn't want to take away his childhood in the way that hers was taken away. And now there's the whole Maddox situation that just started. So Vivi says, "Hey, if you don't want to be in the mortal world, go join Maddox." But to Jude, that would mean putting Oak on the throne before he's ready, and also letting Maddox run a dictatorship in Elfame. But Vivi makes an interesting point, that helping Maddox means hurting Cardan, and that is very appealing to Jude. It even gives her a few ideas, good ones. As the older sister, Vivi doesn't want any of this to be happening, so she gets up to get some ice cream and says, "Hey, whatever happens, happens. Let's eat." So they eat ice cream and they watch TV, and Jude plans her next move. After all, she's Maddox's daughter, and he taught her that you must be strong enough to strike and strike and strike again without tiring. The first lesson is to make yourself that strong. And that is the end of The Wicked King by Holly Black. I have to be quiet or my neighbor will call the police on me. But thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. I cannot express to you how appreciative I am, how incredible it is to make these videos, how thankful I am that this series exists in the world. I'm 3 Red Bulls deep and this has been a wild journey, so if you enjoyed, please like the video, send it to your friends, smash that subscribe button. I don't know why I love saying that so much, but I hope you have an incredible day, and I love you, and I miss you already, and I'll see you soon. Also, the brain jar still isn't full, and I cannot believe it.